Chapter 175. With regards to Chifeng's problem, Sillin still valued it quite a bit. Previously, he had said that he would give Chifeng two choices, a human or a dog. Different choices meant different directions of education and training. Currently, other than his abilities and the innate abilities that came with his genes, Chifeng was practically a blank piece of paper. As for how this blank piece of paper should be developed, Sillin would leave the main choice to Chifeng. If Chifeng regretted his decision in the future, he could only blame himself. Only when he personally made the decision would it have any meaning to spur him on. Chifeng learned very quickly on his own. His IQ was there, and the genes that he inherited and the development of his brain had given him quite a bit of talent. This was something that not many people were born with. With a high starting point, even if he started slowly, he would be able to catch up very quickly. Man or dog? Huimao squatted at a high place and looked down at Chifeng, who was talking to the intelligent learning device. Regarding the direction that Chifeng had chosen to develop as a man or a dog, Huimao was actually not very interested. From the perspective of a cyborg, there was no difference between a man or a beast to him. Anyway, as long as he had Sillin by his side, it would be fine. As for whether the others were human or beast, or whether they were neither human nor beast, it did not matter to him at all. In fact, previously, Chifeng did not really understand why Sillin wanted him to make such a decision. However, after understanding the different life trajectories of humans and dogs, Chifeng resolutely chose a human. Dogs were tamed and loyal, while humans were independent. The reason why Sillin had decided to bring Chifeng along was because Chifeng was different from other Cerberus, independent nature, and not stubbornly carrying the twisted responsibility of a guard dog of hell, and abiding by it. Although Sillin had expected Chifeng to choose a human, when Chifeng had made his decision, he was actually a lot happier. Since Chifeng had chosen human, then the next step would be to teach Chifeng according to the standard of human. Sillin told Scarlet Wind to walk on two legs instead of using both hands and feet. He also learned to use his hands when he was eating. Right now, Scarlet Wind wasn't used to using his claws nor his hands yet. Sometimes his fingers were too stiff, and while they were agile when tearing prey apart, it was a different story when it came to using tools. In fact, he had even broken a lot of tools due to his poor grasp of strength. However, Sillin didn't mind. After so many years, he had to get used to it. Fortunately, Chifeng often saw Sillin Hulong's movements and learned quickly. Although he wasn't used to walking on two legs and couldn't run quickly, he could still walk a little. Some of the fur on his body was shaved as well. He couldn't put it on Chifeng before his fur had fully grown. The fur on this little guy's body was too thick. After all, he had canine genes. Although it wasn't as obvious as a real dog, compared to a normal human, the fur was still a little conspicuous. After shaving his face, hands, and other places, he trimmed the tuft of fur on his head and put on his clothes. However, if one ignored his ears that were slightly sharper than a normal person's and that furry tail behind him, he looked no different from a normal child. On this day, after sleeping for a few days, Lung woke up and circled around Chifeng a few times while clicking his tongue. "I really can't believe that the dog from back then still thinks like that," said Lung, who was sitting at the dining table. There was a small dining table with 4 seats. Chifeng used a spoon to dig at the food in his bowl. His long fingernails had long since retracted into his fingers. Together with his grinning child's face, he looked quite harmless. From time to time, Huimao would also grab the grilled fish on the plate with his claws, shoot out his claws and nail them onto the grilled fish like a fork. Then he would bring the grilled fish to his mouth. After teasing Chifeng for a while, Lung said, "Sillin, have you thought about which planet to go to?" Before he went to sleep, Lung told Sillin to think about his future itinerary. Since he had decided to go to a rank 3 prison planet, then he had to look for it first. Lung didn't really care which planet he went to, so he directly passed the decision to Sillin and flew straight to his destination after he woke up. The reason he chose a rank 3 prison planet was because there were too many forces in this sector. Now that the previous rank 1 prison planet had suffered a devastating blow, the forces in this sector had become even more xenophobic. High-rank prison planets were too difficult, and right now those places were firing points. Many great forces outside of Sector S had their eyes on high-rank prison planets. Conversely, only a rank 3 prison planet was the most suitable for him right now. If he didn't feel satisfied when the time came, then he could try out a high-rank prison planet depending on the situation. However, those places weren't places where he could just cause trouble as he pleased. Bravery didn't mean that he would look for trouble for himself. Since he had to make a choice, Sillin didn't like to be too careless. After looking at the star map for a while, he pointed at one of them. That rank 3 prison planet wasn't too far away from where they were right now, and it wasn't the closest rank 1 prison planet to the previous one. After looking at it for a while, Lung also agreed to it. He inputted the coordinates of that rank 3 prison planet into the starship's destination, and entered autonomous navigation with the assistance of robots. Now that Lung had another person to talk to, he teased Chifeng like he was teasing a child. Chifeng gave him a lot of face and didn't despise Lung for being too talkative. Before they reached their destination, they received a secret message from the Andryra family. After Lung inputted the decryption program, the message was displayed. Although the Andryra family didn't participate much in the events of the past, a few of their seniors had been sent to that prison even earlier. Therefore, the people they sent this time were mainly responsible for the safety of those family seniors. After all, with the current situation, there was no telling who would take the opportunity to kill them. Even Fog and Wuxia had appeared, and one of the Great Four, Lon Hudi, was ready to make a move. Who wouldn't be cautious? After reading the secret message, Lung let Sillin read it as well. It wasn't much of a secret, and it would be helpful to their next operation anyways. A calamity of destruction? Sillin murmured after reading it. Lung scratched his head. Isn't that a bit too much? Say, even if those people came to Sector S to save a few people or kill a few people, it still wouldn't cause a calamity to the planet, would it? A calamity of the apocalypse? In fact, most prison planets in Sector S were either rank B or rank C. The higher the level of a prison planet, the lower its livability. As for Sector S's livability planets, most of them were controlled by the various forces of their own sector. But even rank B and rank C livability planets weren't easy to build. Wouldn't it be a pity to destroy them? Sillin sighed. Of course we wouldn't care if it wasn't our planet. It was true that the forces of Sector S were xenophobic not only because they hated the interference of foreign forces, but also because they were worried that the foreign forces would ignore the situation of the sector and destroy some decent planets. After all, it was difficult to even find a rank B livability planet right now. When he recalled what happened on that Grade 1 prison planet, Sillin Helong also fell silent. For some people, destroying a planet was just too easy. Although it was a Grade 1 prison planet, it was destroyed in less than half a day's time. There was no telling if other prison planets would follow in their footsteps. The defense of a Grade 1 prison planet is relatively simple. Fog and Wuxia didn't have to put in much effort. Earlier, they used a virus to create chaos, and the other forces may use similar methods. Sillin said. Just like how Sillin used parasites to almost turn Poison Fong's garrison planet into a graveyard back then. There were just too many ways to destroy a planet and send it into a calamity of the apocalypse. Sometimes people complained about the military and government of the League of Stars, saying that they were too powerful and too hypocritical. But it had to be said that places governed by the military and government of the League of Stars were relatively safer. Unlike Sector S, the military and government of the League of Stars wouldn't say anything if a planet was destroyed. The troublesome ones were the forces of Sector S. Let's pay more attention when we get there. Right now, even a Grade 1 prison planet isn't safe, and the Grade 3 prison planets in the middle might run into some trouble. That's all we can do. We're not going to give up, are we? Lung yawned and went to the equipment room to prepare some stuff. He had to make more preparations this time, or he would be too passive if something happened. When they were about to reach their destination planet, Sillin hesitated whether he should bring Chifeng with him. After all, Huimao had made up his mind to tag along and leave Chifeng alone on the starship. The little guy always looked unhappy and looked at Sillin Helong pitifully all day long. He would even whimper and pretend to be pitiful. Then let's bring him. Huimao licked his paws and wiped his face. It's not like he's weak. Lung also agreed to bring Chifeng with him. Even if he didn't move with them, He might be of help with his beast talent. It didn't take long before Sillin breathed a sigh of relief. The Grade 3 prison planet Sillin had chosen was coincidentally the planet Guidai had stayed on 6 hours ago according to the ephemeris. Inside the prison of this Grade 3 prison planet, due to the major incident that had happened on a certain Grade 1 prison planet, all the prisons had strengthened their security. The frequency of patrolling by the prison guards increased, and the defense systems, especially the weapons systems, were checked every once in a while to prevent them from being infiltrated without knowing it. Because the management of Grade 3 prisons was not as loose as Grade 1 prisons, the prisoners basically didn't even leave their cells, and there were no chaotic situations such as gathering together to fight. What made the prison guards relieved was that the prison had been very peaceful recently. Apart from the rising tension of the prison guards, there were no unusual signs in the prison. But it was too early to be relieved. Some of the prisoners were a little restless. Although there were usually quite a few prisoners who went crazy, they were not too conspicuous among these crazy prisoners. Some of the prisoners began to feel nauseous and vomit, and some of them even fainted. Some of the prisoners noticed that their limbs were heavy, and their muscles were atrophied and weak, even paralyzed. Some of them noticed that their vision had decreased, and their joints were sore, swollen, and tender. One of the prisoners suddenly noticed that there were some abnormal uneven scars on his face when he was rubbing his face, and the area of the scars was still expanding. Some of the prisoners anxiously scratched their heads, and found that they were pulling out bunches of their own hair. Even their eyebrows and beards began to fall off. The sudden great panic caused the emotions that the prisoners had suppressed for many years to explode. One by one, they began to pound the walls and scream in despair. Even though they were separated by cells, they could feel the restlessness of the prisoners around them. In fact, not only the prisoners, but some of the prison guards were also experiencing the same situation. Because they had made various preparations beforehand, the prison guards quickly began to take measures as soon as such a situation occurred. They were able to prevent the virus, but not the radioactive material. When did the radioactive material get in? Why didn't the prison's radiation detectors warn them? The prison guards were busy trying to save themselves and check the defense system. The prisoners were wailing in their cells. However, Guidai Shirsi didn't have that much time to play with the prisoners. After he noticed that something was wrong, he took out the thing that Guidai Ling had left for him and opened the cell door. Guidai Shirsi was the big man with a scruffy beard. The reaction around him was different from what Guidai Ling had said. It had been brought forward by a day. In that case, it wasn't Lon Hudi who did this, but someone else. Ghost Butterfly 14 did not want to stay here any longer. The radioactive substances did not have much of an effect on him for the time being. He had not wasted any time during his years in prison, and his strength had improved a lot. He was much stronger than before. The people who came out of prison were not only Guidai Shirsi and the others from Lon Hudi. There were also people from other forces. Obviously, some people had secretly taken action during this period. In order to create chaos and escape, the people who came out of prison released the other prisoners. 14. Hurry up and find 17. Things have changed. I don't know if anything happened to her. There's more and more radioactive material. Leave now. One of them said. Got it. You guys go first. I'll go after her immediately. Guidai Shirsi said as he came to a cell and opened the door. The person in the cell was reading the newspaper and sitting peacefully in a chair. He wasn't affected by what was happening outside. He didn't panic because of the radioactive material either. He still exuded an academic aura and looked gentle and cultured. When Guidai Shirsi opened the cell door, Gaydar didn't look up at him. Guidai Shirsi didn't show any dissatisfaction because of Gaydar's cold and indifferent reaction. Instead, he bowed to Gaydar as a junior. Many people bowed to Gaydar when they saw him. Even Guidai Ling had to take the initiative to greet him as a sign of respect. After bowing, Guidai Shirsi left and moved with his companions. After Guidai Shirsi left, a few crazy prisoners came in. These prisoners had almost lost their self-awareness. They were no different from lunatics. After these crazy prisoners entered Gaydar's cell, they jumped at Gaydar with cruel smiles. The two prisoners who came in directly fell to the ground. They didn't have any wounds, but if someone came to examine them, they would find that their hearts were broken. Throughout the whole process, Gaidar's actions didn't change. He drank the water in the cup and put down the teacup. The old newspaper in his hand flashed with old images from more than 10 years ago. After neatly folding the old newspaper and putting it on the table, Gaidar patted his pants and slowly walked out of the cell. The prisoners crowded around him were forcibly pushed away by a force. Those who were too persistent were directly obliterated. The cell's defense system had been paralyzed. Although the prison guards and technicians tried their best to stop it, it was still in vain. The surrounding surveillance cameras didn't need Gaidar to deal with them. They were already useless. Before walking out of the cell, Gaidar looked at a corner. There was an invisible person there, but it wasn't Gui Dailing. When the man saw Gaidar looking over, he expressed that he didn't mean to offend him. His whole body tensed up. He was a little shocked when he saw Gaidar just now, but he couldn't care less now. He hurriedly made his stance clear. Gaidar was in a good mood, so he ignored him and walked out of the cell. Interesting, these fellows who had been dormant for many years have come out. The prison guards were busy dealing with the escaped prisoners. They had made preparations beforehand, so they weren't completely powerless. Explosions came from many parts of the prison. The prisoners of a level 3 prison weren't completely fearless against bullets, and many of them had already died on the ground. When Sillin and the others arrived at the vicinity of their destination planet, they discovered that something was wrong with the planet. It seemed like there was a problem with the orbiting satellites as well. At the very least, after Lung tried to send out a signal, there was no response. What do we do? It seems that the riot inside has begun, Lung said. Before he came to Sector S, Lung had been preparing to cause some disturbance. But after he arrived, he discovered that he didn't need to do anything at all. Someone smarter had already done it in advance. Sillin didn't say anything. Instead, he looked at the satellites orbiting the planet. He couldn't help but feel that something was going to happen on these satellites. Lung brought up the detection device and scanned image. The energy waves on the planet were already very wide, and it wasn't just inside the prison. There were energy waves outside the prison as well, and there were a lot of crossfire going on. The escaped prisoners were also in conflict with each other, so it wasn't unusual for them to take out a thorn in their side. Looking at the image on the screen, and just as Lung was about to say something, Sillin pointed at the satellites outside. A few smaller satellites were separated from the satellites. Sillin knew that these satellites would fly to various parts of the planet and form a huge network of defense and attack at specific locations and angles. It was the microsatellite array. It looked like the prison's administrators were desperate. A network like this would cause a lot of damage to the prison, and they wouldn't activate it unless they were forced to a certain extent. It wasn't that the surveillance device didn't respond to Lung's unfamiliar signal. It was that they didn't have the time to do so. Right now, the people controlling the microsatellite array should be their top priority. However, before these microsatellite arrays could come into play, the mother satellites suddenly shot out rays of white light. Then the white light swept across the microsatellites. There was a brilliant explosion. All the microsatellites were blasted to smithereens. That's... Lung's mouth fell open. What's that? I don't know, Sillin said, but the planet's external defenses are gone now. Some devices were installed on the mother satellites. However, this was the first time Sillin had seen a microsatellite array destroyed in one go. Just which force had developed such technology? Do you want to go down and take a look? Sillin said. Now that the planet was in chaos, it would be easier to break in. Of course. Let's teleport to a fixed point. All right. Chapter 176. Sillin chose a temporarily uninhabited place slightly further away from the prison, and teleported there directly. As for the starship, it remained hidden somewhere around the planet. This time, Sillin Helong did not plan to split up. After last time's lesson, he knew that every prison planet in Sector S was a great threat. If he was too far away and something happened, the other party would not be able to rescue him in time. As for Huimao and Qifeng, the main reason you're bringing Qifeng with you this time is to familiarize him with the battlefield environment. Stay hidden and observe. Don't do anything rash, Sillin said. Observe. Huimao's beard bristled. He was about to voice his opinion, but he thought of something and pulled his ears back. He said reluctantly, all right. Teach some of your battlefield techniques to Qifeng, especially electronics and firepower equipment. He doesn't have them in his original environment. That shouldn't be a problem for you, right? No problem. Huimao replied with his ears drooping. Sillin pinched the back of its neck and brought it up to eye level. Promise me you won't do anything rash. I promise. He gave a few simple instructions to Qifeng and told them to prioritize their own safety. He didn't care if they died here, and they could forget about following him in the future if anything happened. They only split up after receiving his promise. Watching the two figures flying away, Sillin sighed. I can't shake the feeling that these two aren't easy to deal with. In such a chaotic environment, it shouldn't be a problem as long as they don't attack first. Besides, they're not weak either. Lung patted Sillin. Let's go and see who we can run into this time. Some of the people who had appeared at Sector S this time were rare outside of Sector S. Every time they probed deeper, they would be able to obtain some very important information. This was also one of the reasons why Sillin and Lung had come here despite knowing the danger. Sillin and Lung slowly snuck their way towards the prison. There were people fighting inside the buildings around the prison, and they were basically all prisoners who had escaped from the prison. They were firing at the guards and guard robots that had been released from the prison, and the prison guards were too busy to care about the situation outside the prison to care about what was happening outside. The two of them carefully avoided the crossfire of these prisoners. One of the guard beasts noticed them, but before it could roar, Sillin shot it through the eye and killed it. Your marksmanship isn't bad. Long laughed. Nice gun. Sillin put away his gun and continued to sneak forward. The gun was given to him by Lung. It was a gun specially made by the Andryra family, and its power wasn't something a regular gun could compare to. The air was filled with the smell of blood, human, beast, and the rustling sounds of destroyed robots. Compared to a level 1 prison, the defense here was indeed much more complicated. However, the collapse of the main defense system was like the removal of an arm of the prison, so it was much more difficult for the prison guards to deal with it. Sillin was walking towards the prison when he suddenly stopped and looked diagonally upwards. There were no overly tall buildings on Prison Planet, but there were a lot of 2- or 3-story houses in the surroundings. They weren't normal residential houses, but rental houses. They were used to rent to visitors at high prices, and they were also temporary residences for transport personnel. However, it wasn't a period of replenishment recently, and there weren't many visitors either. Most of the houses were empty, and now they were riddled with holes by the prisoners and guard beasts. Sillin gestured to Lung and moved towards the direction. There was a bathroom there, and it was locked. Opening this kind of lock was a piece of cake for Lung. He took out his decoder and quickly unlocked it with a beep. When he opened the bathroom door, Sillin immediately saw a young man lying there covered in blood. His body was pierced in many places, and it didn't look like he was stabbed by a sharp weapon. He's still breathing despite being injured to this extent, Lung said after taking a look. This person's internal organs were severely damaged, especially the ones on his abdomen. One could tell from the wounds and the mucous membranes and small fragments in the blood that flowed out. However, this person's life force was still maintained despite such injuries, and it was even showing signs of recovery. Although the rate of recovery was extremely slow, it was still healing. He doesn't look like a prisoner here. Sillin looked at the equipment on this person's body. Because of the extra holes, Sillin could see patterns from a bloody hole on the side of the person's abdomen. Sillin reached out and lifted the clothes on this person's abdomen. The patterns were mainly on this person's waist. It was a butterfly tattoo with a sinister wing pattern. Ghost butterfly. Sillin and Helong looked at each other, both surprised and puzzled. He was surprised that someone from Ghost Butterfly would actually appear here, and puzzled as to who had the ability to injure this person to this extent. According to this person's physique, he should be quite strong. Just as Sillin Helong was feeling puzzled, the young man who was leaning against the wall suddenly opened his eyes, and the sudden burst of killing intent caused the surrounding temperature to drop significantly. However, this killing intent quickly retreated, and he looked at Silin and Lung with puzzlement. Gue Daishichi? Lung called out. There was a number 17 on this person's ghost butterfly tattoo, which also represented this person's identity. This young man was Gue Daishichi, who had been with Gue Dailing before. After Gue Dailing left that time, he had been hiding in the surroundings, waiting for the right time to make his move. However, he did not expect that he would also end up in a predicament. Seeing that Silin Helong knew his identity and did not show any killing intent, he did not seem like a prisoner who had escaped from prison. He nodded, but did not say anything. Right now, he did not have the strength to speak. It was already good enough that he could just barely start to recover. Looks like you can't speak. Lung frowned. His vocal cords are not injured. Gue Daishichi's face twitched. But I injured my lungs and other organs. Gue Daishichi glared at the two people in front of him. Since there was no killing intent, these two people did not seem to be planning to help him either. Just like that, the two of them stared at each other. The sounds of gunshots and fighting outside the door did not distract the three of them. Finally, Silin shifted his gaze to Lung. When he saw Silin's gaze, Lung covered his chest with his hand. This guy has a beast's body. I'll just use normal medicine. High-grade medicine is too wasteful. Alright, I'll use my normal medicine. Silin squatted down and looked at Gue Daishichi. Let's make a deal. I'll give you stimulant medicine that can stimulate your recovery ability, but you have to write an IOU. 1 bottle of medicine for 1 million, and you can also tell us about the situation here. How about that? If you agree, just nod. Gue Daishichi's expression was a little stiff. 1 bottle of normal stimulant medicine for 1 million? What kind of scam was this? But now Gue Daishichi had no other choice. His life was at stake here, and the situation outside was chaotic. If he did not meet 14 and the others, he would definitely die at this rate of recovery. Gue Daishichi's already pale face from blood loss became even paler. He gritted his teeth and nodded. When I recover, I'll beat you guys to death. Silin rummaged around and took out a bottle of medicine. Although it's small, the effect is not bad. Looking at the small thing in Silin's hand, Gue Daishichi wanted to kill himself. Wasn't a normal stimulant medicine 1 milliliter per bottle? When did it become 10 milliliters? Although this medicine was too small, the effect was not bad. After taking the medicine, Gue Daishichi's recovery speed increased significantly. 2 minutes later, the wound had already scabbed. Lung could not help but sigh. As expected of a beast, Gue Daishichi rolled his eyes at them. He stood up and took a deep breath, feeling much better. All my equipment is destroyed and I don't have 1 million now. How do you call me? How do I contact you? I'll send it to you when the time comes. I was going to write an IOU, but there's no need for that now. Anyway, with your identity as Gue Daishichi, I believe your Lon Hudy should be trustworthy. After all, it's one of the big 4. Silin said with "I'm very tolerant" look. He also threw a nutrient pill to him. The stimulant recovery was too forceful, so he needed to replenish it. Thanks. He took it and swallowed it. It was really too forceful now. You're welcome. 100,000. Oh. Gue Daishichi's eyelids twitched. Can I spit it out? When he saw Silin Helong looking at him as if he was an idiot, Gue Daishichi felt that his intelligence had deteriorated after the injury. Since there were fewer people outside, Gue Daishichi told them what happened to him. Originally, they planned to take action at a time when the time was right. Once the time was up, the people in the prison would be able to come out, and Ghost Butterfly 17 would be waiting for them outside. According to the plan, there would not be too much of a commotion, but the sudden chaos had completely messed up the original plan. After receiving news from Ghost Butterfly 14 in the prison, Ghost Butterfly 17 was about to go and help him, but he ran into someone and was beaten to this state. Some of his equipment was also destroyed, and if he had not escaped quickly, he would have died. After escaping here, he hid in this bathroom. Who hurt you? Silin asked. I don't know. He's invisible, and he's very strong, Gue Daishichi answered. Lon Hudy's people are actually only locked up in a level 3 prison? Lung said while rubbing his chin. Guidai Shichi obviously didn't want to continue talking about this. He was much more energetic now. After wiping away the traces in the bathroom, he said that he was going to find his companions, and then left. By the way, let me tell you something. Before leaving, Guidai Shichi said, "There's a big shot in this level 3 prison. I think he's coming out now. Be careful, don't offend him." Who? Silin Helong looked at Guidai Shichi. Hunting knife gaydar. After separating from Guidai Shichi, Silin Helong found a relatively secluded place to stop and ponder over Guidai Shichi's words. "What are you thinking about?" Lung asked. "There's no blood," Silin said. "Ha! Do you remember when we went to look for him? There was no blood on the ground. His wounds didn't bleed when he escaped, but only started bleeding in the bathroom. This means that he can control the bleeding. The bathroom's entrance has also been treated, and there are other scents that cover up the smell of blood. Even the guard beasts won't be able to smell it. Lon Huti's men are not to be underestimated." A pause later, Lung asked again, "What do you plan to do about hunting knife gaydar?" "We'll take it one step at a time. I hope we don't run into him. But even if we do, as long as we don't offend him, he probably won't attack small fries like us, right?" Lung held his head and ran his fingers through his hair to scratch it. He thought for a moment, "I didn't think that Lon Huti and hunting knife gaydar would be here. If we were to check the prisoners' information, we probably wouldn't find their records. In fact, I'm guessing that an important person from Mist, or Wuxia, is hiding in that level 1 prison." Silin said. "It's unexpected. The prison at Sector S has become their hiding place. Then are we still going in? After all, the employer of this mission at Sector S is you, so the choice is yours." Silin looked at Lung. "Won't you feel regretful if we don't go? Let's go. There are some things we need to understand since we're here. Even if we don't understand them, it's still important to get some information." Boom. Another explosion occurred at the prison. "Let's go. We'll seize this opportunity." Silin Helong took advantage of the chaos created by the explosion and entered the prison through a breach. The moment he stepped into the prison, Lung suddenly felt uncomfortable all over. Silin dragged Lung into an empty office. The prison guards had all gone out to deal with the prisoners, so no one was here. "What's going on? I feel uncomfortable all over." Lung looked at the scanner. There was no other life around, but it still made him feel very uncomfortable. "Radioactive substances." Hearing Silin's words, Lung hurriedly looked at the mini detector in his hand. Although there are some rays and particles, they're not within the range of threat. If it was really serious, the detector I carried on me would have sounded an alarm a long time ago. Silin felt the substances in the air and shook his head. It's indeed radioactive substances, and there's a lot of them. It's just that a lot of them have already decayed, and are no longer within the range of threat. The period of threat has already passed. Looking at the elements and radiation levels displayed on the detector, he said, "You're saying that most of them have already decayed. After decaying, they would become another type of element." It was no wonder that the detection data was off. But how could they decay so quickly? It's understandable if it's a small amount, but if it's as you say, this is a large amount of radioactive substances. Isn't it impossible to predict the precise time when a radioactive nuclide decays? "Godfather." Silin said the name directly. Lung's entire body trembled, and he looked at Silin with his mouth wide open in disbelief. Then he covered his face and squatted there. "Silin, how can our luck be so good?" Godfather was a person. 20 years ago, as a 4-star academician at the League of Stars Research Institute, he discovered a method to control the time when radioactive elements decayed. He controlled the activity of their nuclei so that the time of decay would proceed according to his will. At that time, it had influenced the entire academic community of the League of Stars. However, many academics, especially those from the League of Stars Research Institute, voiced different opinions. Later on, when it was revealed that Godfather had caused the deaths of many innocent researchers in the process of his research, Godfather's research was put under control. Later on, Godfather escaped with his technology and joined the Azrael organization. He had always been an authority in the research of radioactive elements and decay, so people later gave him a nickname, Godfather. Godfather had influenced many people. Regardless of whether it was good or evil, people in the research of elements worshipped this Godfather. Ever since he joined the Azrael organization, Godfather had never been heard from again. Since Godfather had taken away his technology and research results, and he had also joined the Azrael organization, the matter that could have been published in the absolute authoritative journal Password had also disappeared. Now that Godfather was mentioned, Azrael had to be mentioned. Azrael was a unique organization. In their view, there was no such thing as good or evil. They did not belong to hunters, adventurers, or assassins. Although they were officially classified as a threatening group, they still had many supporters in the League of Stars. The reason for this was their strength, absolute strength. The average combat power of Lon Hudi's people was the highest in the hunter group, but if compared to the people of Azrael, they would have to admit defeat. However, not everyone in Azrael had strong individual combat power. For example, Godfather was more inclined towards academics, so his combat power was not high. Generally speaking, everyone in Azrael had the absolute right to speak in the fields they were familiar with. It was just that they showed this right to speak in their actions. Elemental decay, system intrusion, defense destruction, and unknown combat power. Compared to Mist and Wuxia, Azrael was more of a headache for the government and the military. At least Mist and Wuxia were purer. They were an assassin organization. But Azrael was not necessarily the same. They could play the role of assassins, hunters, and academics. However, in the past few years, Azrael had very few activities. Silin's generation and their parents' generation only heard about their past stories. Azrael only lived in legends. But now, yes, it must be Azrael. The instant destruction of the microsatellite array was probably done by them, Silin sighed. Ever since he became interested, he sighed a lot more. Why would Azrael come here? Who knows? Just like how no one would have expected Mist and Wuxia to appear in a mere level 1 prison, people who should have appeared on a level 5 prison planet have all appeared in unexpected places. Silin sent a message to Huimao. Since the situation on this planet was even more complicated, Silin had to remind them again. Huimao replied very quickly. They had found a warehouse stocked with food. There were still some fresh goods, and they were currently eating. Seeing Huimao's reply, the corner of Lung's mouth twitched. Whatever, this trip won't be in vain. Adjusting the parameters of the micromonitor, Lung said, let's go loot in the chaos. Loot what? Energy blocks. Maintaining the defense of a level 3 prison consumed a lot of energy. Compared to a level 1 prison, it consumed more energy, so the storage was correspondingly larger. There's not much fresh goods on the starship. After we get the energy blocks, we'll go to Whis to buy food. That way, if anything happens later, it'll be hard to find food. Nutrient pills really tasted bad. Lung definitely did not want to live that kind of life. After making up his plan and expanding his scan to obtain the layout of the prison, and choosing his route, Silin Helong went straight to the energy block storage room. The strange thing was, the closer he got to the energy block storage room, the fewer people he met. This was because many of the people who made it here alive had died. There were many dead people lying in the passageway leading to the energy block storage room, but there were no fatal wounds on their bodies. All the wounds that could be seen were caused by them fighting each other. Chapter 177. Logically speaking, the defenses of the energy storage room should be quite good. Apart from the prison's internal main defense system, due to the fact that the energy storage room's potential instability was rather high, apart from the special storage room to prevent energy leakage, there was also a separate defense system. One had to understand that if a large number of energy blocks became unstable due to some unknown factor, once it exploded, a large half of the prison would be destroyed. However, in this passageway leading to the energy storage room, there weren't any defensive robots to be seen. The area where the energy storage room was located belonged to a high radiation zone, so there were usually designated robot sentries. However, apart from the dead prisoners lying on the ground, there wasn't a single robot sentries to be seen. Lung looked at the display on the life scanner, and then shook his head at Sillin, indicating that there weren't any other life forms detected in this area for now. No other life forms? Looking at the state of the prisoners on the ground, it didn't seem like the work of robots. After carefully looking around, Sillin crouched down, placing his hand on the body of a prisoner who was already dead, but didn't have any injuries on the surface of his body. Heart shattered, Sillin said in a low voice. He then looked at a few other prisoners who also didn't have any injuries on the surface of their bodies, their conditions the same as this one. Most of the prisoners in this passageway died like this. It wasn't the work of robots, but humans. However, what Sillin Helong was confused about was, who had the ability to easily shatter the hearts of these prisoners without harming their bodies? Was it someone from Azrael? Or was it someone else? Sillin Helong walked towards the energy storage room even more carefully. He couldn't just blindly trust the life scanner. Sometimes even machines could lie. The door to the energy storage room was open, and there were no signs of forced entry. The thick custom-made cabin door was open very obediently, and at the same time, there were some energy fluctuations coming from the energy storage room. These energy fluctuations weren't that great, and could even be said to be quite docile. However, it was precisely because of this that Sillin Helong became even more nervous. There were only docile energy fluctuations inside the energy storage room, no other activity, not even human breathing. Was it really a robot? Sillin Helong arrived near the door, but didn't enter immediately. Lung released a small spherical detector, and the small ball floated in the air as it flew towards the door of the energy storage room. However, when it reached the door, its program momentarily went haywire, and it immediately rolled away, rolling away extremely quickly. Lung. Sillin gestured for him to go over and take a look. As he carefully moved to the door, Sillin could already feel the obvious magnetic field around the storage room's door. No wonder Lung's probing device had gone haywire. This should also be the reason why the robot sentinels did not appear here. However, when Sillin saw the person inside, he was no longer in the mood to think about the robot sentinels and the changes in the magnetic field. It was actually a human. Seeing that Sillin's entire body was tensed up but he was not attacked, Lung quickly moved over and looked at the storeroom. When he saw the person inside, Lung's pupils shrunk. The box containing the energy blocks had already been opened. The man had his back to Sillin and the others, one hand directly placed on the energy block. After all, the energy blocks here were not like the energy blocks used in small household appliances. The energy blocks here were stacked in large chunks that were 1 meter high. However, Sillin could clearly see that the energy blocks in the box next to him had already been exhausted. That person was absorbing energy. Without using any other medium, he could actually directly absorb energy from the energy blocks. However, thinking back, Sillin seemed to have done something similar himself. That person did not seem to notice Sillin Helong's arrival. He did not move or turn around at all, still maintaining his original posture. However, Sillin was willing to bet that the person had definitely noticed the two of them a long time ago. Before seeing this person, one would not have been able to sense that there was someone here. This person had too little presence. However, after actually seeing him, it felt absurd, like a combination of contradictions. Sillin Helong very tacitly did not disturb the person's energy absorption, nor did he want to attack and steal the energy blocks while he was absorbing the energy. However, if he left immediately, he did not know if he would be directly obliterated. At least, Sillin felt that if he did that, that person would be ruthless and ruthless. Otherwise, there would not be so many dead prisoners around here. Sillin gave Lung a look. It was best not to act blindly without thinking. Not long after, other prisoners came over. When they saw the energy blocks, they also showed greedy looks. Sillin Helong flashed to a corner of the storeroom to avoid a direct confrontation with these prisoners. These prisoners who came over were obviously mainly targeting the person who was absorbing the energy. Several prisoners raised their guns and fired continuously. These guns were all taken from the prison guards, and they had the prison guards' insignia on them. It seemed that the prison guards were not in a good situation. Bang bang bang. When the bullets got close to that person, there seemed to be a huge resistance. When they were half a meter away from that person, their speed directly dropped to 0. After a few shots, the prisoners who came over also knew that this person was not someone they could deal with. One of them was about to take out a stimulation-type high-energy weapon, but before he could do anything, he directly fell down. Sillin could feel that that person was the same as the prisoners in the passageway outside. His heart was broken. He did not see how he moved his hand. He did not even make any other movements. But the prisoner who was more than 20 meters away was obliterated. The other prisoners wanted to escape, but as soon as they reached the door, they directly fell down. Lung swallowed his saliva and looked at Sillin. What should he do next? Let's keep it like this for now, Sillin thought. A few more people came over in between, but they all met the same result. There were already more than 20 prisoners lying at the door, and they all died from the same cause. 5 minutes later, the energy waves gradually calmed down. He was calm and unhurried. The energy blocks in the box were already dim. The person withdrew his hand and turned around to look at Sillin and Lung. There was no killing intent, no malicious intent. He even had a faint smile on his face, giving off a cultured and refined feeling. But this was the person who had killed so many people without making a sound. When he was watched by that person's somewhat polite and amiable eyes with a faint smile, Sillin Helong only felt all the hairs on his body stand up. The more he was like this, the more dangerous he was. Lung had already directly classified this person as a freak. This type of person who had an absolutely twisted temperament on the outside, and inside was a freak among freaks, not to mention that this freak was the type who killed while smiling. Those prisoners probably didn't even feel this person's killing intent when they died, right? Gaydar looked at the two little fellows not too far away. From Gaydar's point of view, this was how he saw it. Little fellows around 20 years old. He had noticed Sillin Helong a long time ago. The passageway around the storage room extended outwards, and the bottom, top, and sides of the passageway were all covered in a layer of electric charge. As long as someone entered this area, Gaydar would be able to sense it. He could even sense the strength of the intruder through these electric charges. Towards Sillin Helong, Gaydar was rather curious. He didn't immediately make his move, and instead observed the two's reactions while absorbing the energy. It was quite obvious that these two's reactions didn't provoke Gaydar's killing intent. "Who are you two little fellows?" Gaydar asked. Even his voice was gentle. "Little fellow," Sillin Helong roared. Sillin roared. Could it be that this person in front of him was a very old monster? In reality, Gaydar only looked to be close to middle-aged, and the sudden mention of little fellow made Sillin Helong's face twitch a bit. Sillin suddenly thought of that awkward teacher. Back then, old Mo had even called him a little doll. Now that he thought about it, this person in front of him should be around 100 years old, right? "Ahem, hello, my name is Lung." Lung bowed respectfully and said. The etiquette of handing Berzet over to him was quite good, and his salute was very standard. He didn't directly announce his surname, as there were still many people who couldn't stand Andryra's family. "Looking at you as a greeting, you should be from some great family, right?" Gaydar said. At the same time he returned a matching greeting, looking much more gentlemanly than Lung. Lung's face twitched again, exposing himself with a greeting. Yes, my full name is Andryra Lung." He didn't lie. Lung felt that with his ability, lying would definitely be seen through. And this was an old monster in front of him. "Oh, so you're the descendant of that old fox." Lung sighed inwardly. "My dear grandpa, your name as a fox is really well known." However, Lung heaved a sigh of relief. At least the moment the other heard Andryra's name, Lung didn't feel any malice. "Not bad, you have a better future than your old man." Gaydar commented, and then looked at Sillin. "My name is Yuan Sillin." He didn't bow like Lung did, but just a normal greeting a junior would greet an elder. Lung glanced at Sillin and thought, "When did your surname become Yuan? You're a hunter?" Gaydar could tell from Sillin's greeting that he was a hunter. "Yes." "Lone traveler? Or hunter regiment?" "Hunter regiment, Vanguard Hunter Regiment." Gaydar nodded, not seeming to have any other thoughts. However, Gaydar's reaction made Sillin a little disappointed. He had purposely mentioned the surname, Yuan, just to see how the person in front of him would react to the surname. But the result was a little disappointing. After looking at Sillin Helong, Gaydar waved his hand, and 2 large boxes containing energy blocks a few meters away moved to Silin Helong and said, "You can take these 2 with you. I'll take the rest." Seeing that the other party didn't seem to have any intention to pursue the matter, Silin Helong heaved a sigh of relief. Giving them 2 boxes of energy blocks was already giving him enough face. After thanking Gaydar, Lung stored the 2 energy blocks into the subspace container in his hand. The energy blocks couldn't be kept in the subspace for long. They had to be taken out once they returned to the starship to prevent the energy from clashing and causing the subspace to collapse. "When you return, say hello to that old fox Focus and that old fellow Ji-Phone for me," Gaydar said. Focus, Lung's grandfather, had a lot of influence in the League of Stars. His influence included the business, political, and military circles. As for Ji-Phone, he was the head of the Vanguard Hunter Regiment, one of the 6 stars of hunting, and a star hunter. If Gaydar had only mentioned Focus, Silin Helong wouldn't have been so shocked. After all, Focus had a wide range of activities, and there were many people who knew or had dealings with Focus. However, Ji-Phone was different. To be able to say Ji-Feng's name directly and talk about a star hunter in such a tone, then this person, Gaydar. Silin looked at Gaydar and said, "Are you senior hunting knife Gaydar?" Gaydar didn't object to being addressed as a senior by a hunter. He waved his hand and let Silin Helong leave. "You guys still have a whole hour. After an hour, Azrael's star web will be activated. By then, you guys won't be able to survive with your strength." Star web. Although they knew that Azrael's men were here, what was the star web? Gaydar didn't explain much. "You guys will know when the time comes. This is Azrael's experiment." After saying that, Gaydar turned around and ignored Silin Helong. He continued to open a box and absorb energy. Silin shot Lung a look. "Let's leave first." After leaving the energy storage room, Silin Helong didn't dwell on those unsolved mysteries and rushed towards Huimao. According to the plan, he would be able to reach the warehouse there in 10 minutes. After collecting the food, he would leave and return to the starship. If everything went according to plan, he still had time. This time, Silin Helong didn't deliberately hide himself. Instead, he sped up. There weren't many people in the passage leading to the warehouse. If Silin Helong took the time to investigate carefully, he would realize that there weren't many people left in the prison. They had all gone outside. When they passed by a fork in the road, Silin saw a person leaning against the fork. Yes, he saw him. He definitely saw him. Even though he knew that the person was invisible, Silin could still see him. He couldn't see his face clearly. It was just a blurry outline. When Silin Helong ran over, the person only looked at them. He didn't have any intention of attacking. Even though he knew that Silin could see him, he didn't seem to want to attack. He just watched as Silin Helong ran past him. After Silin Helong ran far away, the person chuckled. "This generation of youngsters is really interesting." Compared to Guidai Shichi, the person felt that the 2 who just ran past him were more interesting. Both of them could clearly see him, but neither of them took the initiative to attack like Guidai Shichi. However, they were quite vigilant, still guarding against him even after running so far away. After leaving the fork, Lung said as he ran, "There was someone at the fork just now." "I know, but he didn't seem to have any intention of attacking." "He was the one who injured Guidai Shichi, wasn't he?" "Even if it wasn't him, it must be his companion. It's Azrael's man." Luckily, he didn't have any intention of attacking just now. Otherwise, the 2 of us wouldn't have it easy. Silin Helong was in a hurry. If he really fought with that person, he wouldn't be able to win. Even if he could, it would take up a lot of time. After listening to Gaydar's words, the 2 of them just wanted to hurry to the warehouse to stock up on food and leave. Although he didn't know what the star web was, since Gaydar said that, Silin Helong believed him. Along the way, they only encountered a few prisoners, and they were basically people with confused minds. When they saw Silin Helong, they rushed over, but they were quickly dealt with by Silin Helong. When they arrived at the warehouse, Huimao was holding a fish and gnawing on it. The bones were crunchy, and the fish, which was nearly 100 times larger than Huimao's current size, was bitten until only its head was left. At the side, Qifeng was chewing on jerky. Huimao had said that they should eat as much as they could, so Chifeng didn't hold back at all. Sil and Helong selectively collected some of the items in the warehouse. There was still a lot of food on the starship, so now they were mainly looking for fresh goods. The fresh goods in the surrounding warehouses had all been moved by Sil and Helong. Looking at the much emptier warehouse, Silan looked at the time. There's still 40 minutes. Let's go. Hurry up, said Lung. Let's go, foodie. Silan turned around and called out to Chifeng and Huimao. Seeing that Silan, Lung, and Chifeng had all moved out, Huimao picked up the half-eaten fish head and ran out. Even though half of the fish head had been eaten, it was still much larger than Huimao's current body size, especially since half of the fish head had been bitten off. The pharynx and sharp teeth in its mouth were all exposed, and when Huimao ran with it in his mouth, those teeth looked rather hideous as they moved. What Silan admired the most was this foodie's ability to eat while running. As they ran, the remaining half of the fish head was completely devoured. Because he still wasn't very familiar with running, after running a few steps with his legs, Chifeng used his limbs again, or else he wouldn't be able to catch up to Silan and the others. There were many more people outside the prison, and when Silan and the others ran out, they encountered quite a bit of resistance. Some came from the prison guards, and some came from the prisoners. When Chifeng encountered these people who clearly carried malice and killing intent, he immediately transformed from an obedient baby into a wild beast. Just like when he was hunting prey on his original planet, his deep claws and powerful strength directly tore a person to shreds, making Lung's stomach twitch. Huimao, on the other hand, was much more restrained. He only left a few deep paw prints on the faces of those people. Silan said that they were in a hurry, and that he had just eaten his fill. He just wanted to sleep now. The good thing was that this kind of resistance wasn't constant. The main point of the exchange of fire was at the port, where carrier aircrafts and other things were parked. The prisoners wanted to snatch one and leave, but the warning party definitely wouldn't allow it. The two sides fought fiercely there. The place Silan and the others chose was far away from the port. After arriving at a place where there was temporarily no one, Lung took out a panel on his arm and controlled it remotely. At the same time, the starship's robot controlled the starship to fly over, and after locating Silan and the others, they were teleported back to the starship. After returning to the starship didn't immediately leave the planet. It still maintained its invisible state and watched from afar. After putting the energy blocks into the storage room and the food into the warehouse, Silan Helong looked at the image displayed on the screen in the control room. Looking at the time, there were still 2 minutes left. The lucky prisoners snatched aircrafts and flew out of the planet. The satellite protection network on the periphery of the planet had long been paralyzed, so these aircrafts could come and go as they pleased. Perhaps these lucky prisoners didn't expect what would happen on the planet next, right? Exactly 1 hour later, some lightning-like rays of light suddenly appeared on the periphery of the planet, forming a net that enveloped the entire planet. Is this the galactic web? Chapter 178. The gigantic electro-optical network enveloped the entire planet. Although there were many gaps between these electro-optical networks, not a single spaceship could be seen passing through the gaps. Many spaceships gradually lost control and crashed or exploded when they got close to this network. The energy propulsion equipment in the spaceships lost stability due to the images from these networks, and in serious cases exploded directly. Some of the spaceships that had just taken flight did not approach the network when they saw what had happened in front of them. Instead, they turned on their weapons and opened fire at the network. However, after the missiles that came into contact with the optical network exploded, the network remained intact. From the images taken by the surveillance equipment Lung had left on the planet, it could be seen that the surface of the planet had undergone obvious changes. The struggle between the prisoners and the prison guards had stopped, but what followed was an even bigger problem. There was a layer of electricity flashing on the surface of the metal barricades and walls. A prisoner had been kicked into a metal wall, and because he was unable to stand up, he was charred by the electricity. Even the prisoners who had not come into contact with these metal substances felt that they were in a space filled with electric charges. Their hair stood on end, and the guns and daggers that they had been holding had been thrown away. Now they were all looking at the sky above them in fear. Sets of data measured by the surveillance equipment were transmitted over, and through these measurements, Silin Helong could imagine the current situation on the planet. As the density of the electric charges increased, the situation on the planet became more and more serious. As for the rest, Silin Helong could only speculate based on the images he had seen and the data he had analyzed. The network's coverage and density were gradually increasing. At first, Silin Helong could still see some changes on the planet from the starship, but gradually, the entire dense network formed by electricity covered the surface of the planet. After the gaps became smaller, it was also slowly covered by a layer of light film. The surveillance equipment Lung had left on the planet had lost contact with, and the signal must have been affected and completely cut off. Not long after, streaks of electricity struck the ground from the network. The entire planet was surrounded by lightning and filled with electricity. Silin could not see the exact situation on the ground, but he could imagine this kind of lightning, this kind of density and intensity. It was no wonder that Gaydar had said that with their current abilities, they would not be able to survive under the galactic network. Perhaps the people trapped on the planet could not see clearly, but Silin, who was in space, could see it clearly. The electro-optical network was initially launched from the mother satellite outside the planet. There were satellites in different orbits, and some that should have been launched by Azrael's people. These combined to form the initial network, and then these networks began to branch and connect again. Like a spider weaving a web, there were fixed points, and then a dense network rapidly developed from these points. On the planet under this net, it was as if a violent electromagnetic storm had swept past. Then there was an earth-shattering thunder and lightning. Silin didn't even need to look to know that this planet was riddled with holes after the galactic web was taken back. Prisons, buildings, and so on were no more. Perhaps there would still be a few survivors after going through the star web, but they were still very few. The others, as well as the buildings, had all been reduced to ashes by the lightning. Silin Helong had witnessed the destruction and end of a planet, and he was feeling rather complicated right now. Gaydar had said that this was just one of Azrael's experiments, but why did Azrael's people choose this planet as the experiment site? Was it because the League of Stars' official jurisdiction in Sector S was small? Or was it the same reason Silin Helong had chosen this planet? Or was it something else? Silin did not know. What he knew was that there were still many powerful people and forces in the League of Stars. The destruction of a planet may be but a blink of an eye. Without a reference, it was very difficult for a person to see themselves clearly. Perhaps after 50 years, too many people had forgotten the once famous forces and people. The once familiar names lived in the past era. 50 years had passed, and the new generation had grown up in an environment without them. Then, when these old forces resurfaced, could the new generation continue to fight under such pressure? Fog, Wuxia, Azrael. None of them were inferior to the four great hunter regiments, be it in technique or individual combat power. After this incident at Sector S, the League of Stars would usher in a brand new era. An era where challenges and opportunities coexisted. Let's go. Lung let out a long sigh and started operating on the control panel. Silin nodded. There was no point in staying here any longer. There was no telling how long the star web would last, and no one knew what Azrael's experiment would be like. Right now, the most important thing for Silin Helong and the others was to stay alive. Right now, they did not have any ability to resist Azrael. The gap between them was too big. The Invisible Man did not want to fight them earlier, but what if he wanted to fight them now? Now that Gue Dai Shichi was beaten to such a state, Silin Helong did not want to follow in his footsteps. It was better to leave first. I can't afford to offend him, but can't I just hide? The energy blocks they brought with them were enough for them to leave Sector S. Plus, there were 2 big boxes of energy blocks they fished out from the prison's storage room. They also had enough food. As long as they didn't run into anything special, they should be safe. But with the current situation at Sector S, nowhere was safe. Not long after they left the Rank 3 prison planet, Lung received a message from the Andrira family. Right now, the Rank 4 and 5 prisons were in chaos, but the people there were not easy to deal with. Any random person was a B squadron leader of the 4 great hunter regiments. Moreover, there were a lot of hidden experts in new technological weapons. The 4 great hunter regiments, and some hunter regiments that were slightly weaker than the 4 great hunter regiments, but were pretty strong in the League of Stars, had all appeared. The League of Stars army had also sent a group of people over in secret. There were also assassin organizations, adventurers, and a few big families. On the other hand, the forces of Sector S had stopped their civil war and gathered together to fight against the forces of the outer space. What excited the forces the most was the news of Alilo's cage star map fragment. Scylla suspected that these people had guessed that there would be a star map fragment in the first place, which was why they showed up. However, to Scylla's surprise, Mist and Wuxia had gone silent ever since they appeared on the Rank 1 prison planet. In fact, they did not even participate in the subsequent battle for the star map fragment. If Scylla hadn't experienced the ambush himself, he would never have known that 2 veteran assassin organizations that had kept a low profile for decades had appeared in Sector S. Other than Mist and Wuxia, Azrael did not participate in the battle for the star map fragment despite his high-profile appearance. I'm guessing that they're not interested in the star map fragment that appeared. They're not interested in all 5 Alilos. Lung said. In the myth of creation, the 5 Alilos locked by God's 5 fingers represented courage, new life, fairyland, reform, and evolution respectively. In reality, the 5 corresponding star maps represented 5 different things. The Olilo who represented courage in the myth of creation was White Knight in reality. He was an omnipotent energy source that hunters, adventurers, and the military who often traveled the universe desired. The Olilo who represented reform was the tear of God that Lung and the Andryra family needed. So which star map fragment had appeared in Sector S right now? No matter which of the remaining 3 it was, Mist, Wuxia, and Azrael had not interfered. This meant that they were not interested in the star map fragment that had appeared. At the same time, it meant that they all had the star map fragment that they needed. He did not know which category the star map fragment Scylla possessed belonged to, but Scylla did not have the ability to participate in the current battle. Lung adjusted his course and decided to leave Sector S. Sigh, I thought that it would only be the Big 4 and some other families and organizations causing a ruckus. Who would have thought that all the veterans who had kept a low profile for decades would show up? Lung mumbled while lying on the chair. Logically speaking, there shouldn't have been many participants other than the Big 4, some adventurers, and the military. Why is it the dividing line of an era? Scylla asked. Lung swirled the wine in his glass and said slowly, I've asked my dear Grandpa Fox before, and he said that it was a coincidence. A coincidence? Yes, a coincidence. Although this is the old man's opinion, it seems that I agree with him now. Every force is cunning as hell, and after that coincidence, they all made plans for the later stages. They are all forces that are adept at lying low. After the veteran forces lay dormant, the former small forces would grow up, and the new forces would inevitably be arrogant and boastful. In reality, these forces may very well collapse at the first blow after the veteran powerhouses break out of the ice. Just wait and see, after we leave this time, certain forces will be purged. Now was not the time to consider whether or not the other forces would purge Scylla. After he returned, he, the vice commander, still had to carry the burden. At the very least, he needed to grow up as soon as possible. He was not strong enough yet. Scylla's fingers rubbed the leaf pattern. Back then, he was just a passerby, a weak force, and did not know much about the League of Stars. But after he joined Vanguard, took on the burden of the vice commander, and encountered many strong people. However, he still had no clue about the Fujigen family on the upper tree. Looking at it from another perspective, Scylla still needed to develop himself, see more places, and meet more people. Gaydar did not know about the Gen family, but what about the others? They should know a little about the veteran forces that had existed in the galaxy for hundreds and thousands of years, right? A vice commander was far from enough. He had to enter the core of Vanguard's A squadron in order to come into contact with more information. While they were on their way out of Sector S, both Scylla and Lung were making plans. Lung felt much more relaxed after he had made a plan for himself. He was just about to ask the robots to prepare some exquisite food to reward his brain when he looked up and saw the two idiots not far away from him. Due to Qifeng's self-study, there were some relaxing songs in the teaching video. They weren't loud, and Qifeng was happily wagging his tail while listening to the songs. Meanwhile, Huimao was twisting his fat butt along with the rhythm. "Yo Weez, are you dancing?" Lung laughed. Huimao did not even turn his head and continued to dance. "Yeah, you guys are as dull as a rock. If you keep this up, you'll turn into a rock." He was talking about how Lung and Silin had been in low spirits recently, because of the things they had experienced earlier. They did not speak much, and Huimao looked pretty resentful when he returned. "Alright, according to the plan, it won't be long before we get out of here. After we get out of sector, I'll take you guys out for some entertainment." Lung said generously. "No need, you just need to pay us in full. We accompanied you to Sector S for this mission, so the mission will be over after we get out of Sector S, right? Shouldn't you pay us in full soon after the mission is over?" Lung raised an eyebrow. "You think accompanying me on a trip to Sector S is a vacation? Not only that, you've even picked up a companion who freeloads off me on the starship. Look at that appetite of yours, you eat the most of all fresh food. It's already tens of thousands in total, and you have the nerve to say that." Huimao did not care about this. "I've read the contract. You said that your basic necessities are covered, and you didn't say anything about limiting your food intake. Remember, the money must arrive as soon as possible, and interest will be added if you don't pay." Lung paused for a moment before saying, "Always come to the Andryra family and help me. Let's go earn some money, a lot of money, and then we'll install a giant aquarium for you. I'll keep all the fish you like inside, and whenever you're hungry, you can fish one out to eat. MN, a big mansion is a must, and it's full of beautiful female cats, and..." Huimao's whiskers were bristling as he turned to glare at Lung and interrupted. "How dare you think of me as such a lowly person?" The corner of Lung's mouth twitched when he heard this. "Do you really think you're that noble, Lord Cat?" Coincidentally, Silin had just finished exercising inside the training room and walked into the control room. Lung said to Silin, "Silin, your cat is one of the best." Silin gave him a "you're the only one who knows" look. "You haven't seen the best yet." Whenever he thought of that cat and Lycrabe's wild dance at the dance night, Silin couldn't help but feel that this monster's skills were profound. "Silin, that kid wants to go back on his word." Huimao raised his chin slightly and raised one of his front limbs, pointing a paw at Lung as he spoke. Silin gulped down a bottle of water and replied, "Then let him go. According to the rules, if he goes back on his word, he'll get compound interest." Without another word, Lung took out a bill and scribbled down a string of numbers, then slammed it against Huimao's forehead after he was done. "I don't have anything else, but I'm so poor that all I have is money." Huimao pulled the bill off with his paw and looked at it carefully. Qifeng also came over to take a look, and Huimao even took the opportunity to teach him how to read bills. Reading bills was an ability that Huimao had learned when he first met Silin, and it was also something that would affect the cat's entire life. After seeing the numbers on the bill, Huimao nodded in satisfaction, and even checked the numbers and the hidden password on the bill in front of Lung. Lung was so angry that he almost spat out a mouthful of blood. This bastard actually doubted the authenticity of the bill. After checking, Huimao picked up the bill with his mouth and jumped onto Silin's shoulder. He raised his paw and patted Silin's head. "I want to buy fish biscuits after I get the money." "Sure, I'll buy it." Silin nodded. Huimao happily jumped onto the table again, humming along to the rhythm as he continued to shake his fat butt. Lung walked over and nudged Silin with his elbow. "Your cat has become a demon. And a glutton." Silin looked at the cat and laughed. "Are you going to develop the 6th division as much as possible after you go back?" Lung asked. "I'm only the vice captain right now. The captain still does most of the work. I still need to improve my own strength as soon as possible." "You've improved pretty fast, kid. Back in the day, I was the weakest out of the 4 people in our dorm. That CI Jincheng kid is actually a guy who hides his abilities. I once competed with him in shooting and lost $1 million. I decided then and there that I'd never compete with him again. It's just like giving him money." Lung complained. Silin kicked Lung. Stop bullshitting. You're not much better when it comes to hiding your abilities. Lung did not deny it. Sai, who asked me to be the young master of the Andryra family. Just keep a low profile. Of course. Lung had never revealed his true strength. Outsiders all knew that many of young Master Lung's family's products were high-tech items, and this could be seen from the things he normally used. However, it was precisely these high-tech items that were displayed in front of others that confused people's vision and hid Lung's true battle strength in a dense fog. Sillin knew that Lung was actually very strong, but the guy would not reveal his strength easily unless absolutely necessary. His identity, the identity of the future heir of the Andryra family, was there for all to see. The more he hid, the better his chances of survival would be in the future. Just like back in Seven Lights, there were a lot of things that didn't need to be explained too much. Since the route they chose to leave avoided the conflict zone, although it took them a little longer, they still made it out safely. The conflict at Sector S would probably continue for a while longer, but that was no longer Sillin Hulung's consideration. Right now, everyone had their own plans. The spaceplane that was transferred from the starship was robbed, and not the Andryra families. Therefore, after bidding farewell to Lung, Sillin led Huimao and Chiefing onto the spaceplane and flew out of the starship. Sillin, are we going straight back to Sector K? Huimao looked like he was in a good mood. Yeah, we've spent a lot of time at Sector S. When we get back, the division will probably reorganize a little and carry out the follow-up plans. This can be considered a new beginning for the 6th Division, and we have new members like Yudos, Lycrabe, and Chifeng. Also, the other division commanders will introduce some new members to us. After all, we need new supplies every time we reorganize. RB Squadron is the strongest, Huimao said proudly. Sillin smiled. Yes, the strongest. Along the way, Huimao told Chifeng some things about Sillin's B Squadron, but he only talked about familiar faces like Tang Qiuqiu. Huimao didn't pay attention to the rest at all. Chifeng was a little nervous, but he was more expectant than anything else. Sillin looked at them once before turning back and continuing to pilot the spaceplane. People and talents, combat power and technology were all indispensable to the development of a fleet. As for Sector S, he would visit it again if he had the chance. Chapter 179. In the hall, Carrie sat there with a livid face. His whole body was exuding anger and resentment, and he was in a depressed state. In front of Carrie, there were 4 guys squatting. From left to right they were Huimao, Hulu, Chifeng, Xiueqiu, and the Miantuan. Huimao licked his paws and wiped his beard, wiping the food residue from the corner of his mouth. He didn't care about Carrie's depression at all. Chifeng wagged his tail uneasily and drooped his head, glancing at Carrie from time to time, as if admitting his mistake. Xiueqiu had a charmingly naive look and looked simple and honest, but those who knew this fatty knew that this was just the surface. In fact, this fatty was full of evil tricks, and had learned from the Miantuan to become worse and worse. As for the Miantuan, he had been through a lot of training, and had seen many similar situations. When he needed to put on an act, he would show weakness when he needed to, and he looked even more innocent than Carrie. When Carrie saw them, the veins on his forehead bulged. Didn't they just run out to compete with Yudos? When he came back, he found that his storage cabinet had been emptied, eaten, drunk, and taken. Carrie glanced at Xiueqiu and was furious. This fatty had recently learned to store food like a hamster. Carrie felt that the reason why this fatty's mouth was so big was because it was stuffed with food. Rubbing his forehead, Carrie said in a low voice, I say, why are you guys always staring at my storage cabinet? Xiaoshang, Badao, and Beaver also have a lot of food in their cabinets. Do you think I'm easy to bully? The Miantuan blinked. It couldn't speak, but the instigator was this little devil, and he still looked innocent. Who opened the lock? Carrie asked. After returning to Sector K, Carrie had already changed his locks 3 times. Not long ago, he had purposely obtained a lock that was said to be highly secure from the A Squadron. Otherwise, Carrie would not have let his guard down recently, and the first thing he saw when he returned was an empty storage cabinet. He was wrong, he was really wrong. He shouldn't have let his guard down, especially when this Huimao came back. These guys had gathered together to find a few evildoers from different organizations. Hearing Carrie's question, the three on the right turned to look at Huimao, who was crouching on the far left with a calm expression. Carrie's eyes twitched. He knew it was this cat. Carrie had a love-hate relationship with Huimao. After all, this cat had saved his life before. However, this fellow was really infuriating. Carrie thought for a moment and asked, I say, Wheeze, did Sillin mistreat you and didn't feed you? No. Huimao answered honestly. Then why did you light up my storage cabinet with them? Because the Miantuan and Xueqiu told me that you have Sector K specialties. I haven't eaten much of Sector K's specialties, at least not the stuff in your cabinet. Huimao had no self-awareness of his wrongdoings. Carrie raised an eyebrow and stepped on the Miantuan's tail that was about to escape. Then he grabbed Xueqiu's big face and said, You too, thud. Thud. 2 snaps on the head. Xueqiu covered his head with his chubby hands and looked wronged. Meanwhile, the Miantuan gradually tore down from the wall, his flat body pitifully recovering. Don't give me that. After taking care of Xueqiu and the Miantuan, Carrie faced Qifeng and advised earnestly, I say, Qifeng, don't learn from these 2 bad guys. I'll teach you one thing. You'll be stained by the company you keep. Breaking into someone's cabinet and stealing food is wrong. You shouldn't do it. Qifeng swung his tail and tilted his head, seemingly digesting Carrie's words. Huimao licked his paws and looked at Carrie. He asked, Why are the prices on this planet so expensive, Carrie? Isn't this the Vanguard's base? How can they treat their own members like this? On this planet, the price of a lot of food was doubled, or even several times higher. After seeing the prices, Huimao became stingy. The allowance Sillin gave him was limited, so it really wasn't worth it to buy these things. Because of this, the Miantuan beckoned with his tail and went to rob Carrie. In reality, every squadron's food and other items are specially prepared by themselves. Only medical and some other equipment are used for public use. The stockpiling of items and amassing wealth are all considered by the B Squadron. It is generally believed that capable B squadrons are self-sufficient and have more money on hand. Those who can't can only pay a higher price in exchange. Is that so? How stingy? Huimao's ears twitched. This isn't stingy. If you want to buy food in bulk, the best way is to fly your own spaceplane and buy it. Not even 10 squadrons can afford to feed people with your appetites. Although the 4 fellows in front of him looked quite small, every one of them was a big eater. The Miantuan's appetite was 3 times his body weight, and Huimao, Qifeng, and Xueqiu were all fellows with fast metabolism. Right now, Xueqiu was almost 60 centimeters tall when he stood up. He had been growing really fast recently. Carrie had already flown his spaceplane to go shopping once, and he didn't expect to see Huimao and Qifeng this time. For a growing Qifeng, his appetite was about the same as Xueqiu's. Carrie was thinking that he would have to go shopping again soon. Suddenly, Carrie's expression turned strange. He wanted to slap himself. Fuck. I don't care about Sillin and Tang Qiuqiu, but why do I have to care so much? Isn't this the same as a stay-at-home dad? Qifeng looked at Xueqiu and the Miantuan. They were right. Carrie's stay-at-home dad was very easy to fool. However, this stay-at-home dad seemed to have some mental issues. He actually slapped himself. Looking at the 4 fellows who were communicating with each other with their eyes, Carrie waved his hands helplessly. Get out of here. My stomach hurts just looking at you. Qifeng and Xueqiu. The 2 of you are going to have a cultural assessment. If you can't pass it, your salaries will be deducted. As for your salaries that are in the negative, I won't have a locker to give you 3 lights. Qifeng and Xueqiu were studying cultural knowledge. Although 10 days wasn't a long time, they were improving very quickly. Every few days, they would be given an assessment. However, this assessment wouldn't go easy on them just because they were beginners. It was an assessment for intermediate-level education. This was also the reason why the 2 fellows' salaries were in the negative despite their high IQ. It should be known that during the 5-year recuperation period, they were paid. Every official member would have a stable salary. In the entire 6th Division, the only 2 fellows whose salaries were in the negative were Xueqiu and Qifeng. The difficulty of Xueqiu and Qifeng's assessment was set by Silin. Based on Xueqiu and Qifeng's level of brain development, they would be able to catch up very quickly. After the trip to Sector S, Silin felt a sense of urgency. He had to get these two new members to catch up and integrate into the group as soon as possible. Otherwise, something might go wrong in the later stages of the mission. Xueqiu and Qifeng went to the study room to study. Hui Mao and the Miantuan followed them. One was to give pointers, and the other to watch the show. After the four fellows left, he got up and went outside to breathe in some fresh air, and exhale the stuffiness in his chest. Facing these little bastards every day, he felt like he had gone through the vicissitudes of life. But he didn't expect to see Xiaoshang, Beaver and the others returning from outside just as he walked out of the door. "Yo, Nanny Daddy Carrie, are you done with your training?" Xiaoshang giggled. Carrie felt the string of reason in his head tighten with a dull bang. "You're the Nanny Daddy. You're all Nanny Daddy. You're all Nanny Daddy in your past life, this life, and the next life. Sai, isn't it good that they're close to you? Be it Xueqiu or Qifeng, they're already this strong even before they've grown up. When they've grown up, you'll have a strong backing. Amen. Speaking of which, the little Qifeng is becoming more and more like a human. Yesterday, I saw him pick a vintage lock with ease," Beaver said. The corner of Carrie's eyes twitched again. Lock picking, a bad feeling, in the research building of the 6th Division's stronghold. Silin and Lycrabe were in the middle of their research. Silin had brought back a lot of good stuff this time. The bacteria collected from the foreign planet had already been expanded. There were also the bacteria from the Class 1 prison planet. Although they died very quickly in the prison environment, Silin had frozen them with a special method and brought them to the B Squadron's laboratory. Lycrabe was very interested in the samples Silin had brought back. He had been full of energy lately and didn't sleep for a few nights in a row. He stayed in the laboratory all day long. Today, Silin and Lycrabe worked together to extract a certain antibacterial drug from a few reconstructed bacteria. This was a part of one of Lycrabe's research projects. 72 hours later, Silin looked at the 100 microliters of liquid in the small tube in his hand and sighed. "It's finally out. With this, I can improve the antidote and minimize casualties when we get out." Lycrabe was in high spirits right now. He was very tired, but he felt very fulfilled. Patting Lycrabe, Silin said, "Rest first. You haven't rested for many days." Lycrabe nodded and put the small tubes in his hand into a special freezer. These anti-growth medicines that he had painstakingly purified could not be wasted because of improper storage. After leaving the laboratory, Silin and Lycrabe went to the cafeteria and had a big meal. Lycrabe went back to rest, and Silin was about to go back and rest as well. However, the communicator in his hand suddenly rang. Looking at the person displayed on it, Silin went to a secluded place and connected the call. Shotten's image was displayed on the communicator. In the image, Shotten also looked tired. The B Squadron commanders were all at the A Squadron recently. The A Squadron and their commanders were busy with Sector S's matters. The appearance of Mist, Wuxia and Azrael especially had everyone's nerves tensed up again. Moreover, there was still the matter of a Lilo star map fragment. "What's wrong, Commander?" Silin asked. Shotten pulled the corner of his mouth. He didn't look in a good mood. It was probably because things weren't going well at Sector S that everyone's mood was affected. "How have you been lately, Silin?" As a commander, Shotten didn't have much energy to pay attention to his own unit's situation. Every time he did, he would talk to the lieutenant commanders and learn about the situation of their respective units. "Not bad. I proposed a resistance substance to Lycrabe today, and Lycrabe will be developing and improving it. Qiu went to the shooting range with Ba Dao, and Carrie is with Qifeng and Xueqiu." Silin briefly explained the situation of the unit to Shotten. "Oh, Lycrabe is progressing pretty fast." Shotten's spirits rose, and joy appeared in his eyes. For the 6th Division, innovation was one of the most important things they lacked. Ever since they found the special energy mine at Sector Z, Shotten had gained some confidence among the squad commanders. However, it wasn't enough. Now the only person who could shake Shotten's spirits was Silin's. Whether it was Lycrabe or Yudo's, Shotten was very satisfied with both of them. Now there was Qifeng as well. That non-pure human little guy's attack power was extraordinary. The duo talked about the general situation of the unit, and Sillin learned some things about Sector S from Schotten. It's not just Sector S right now. Undercurrents are surging in the other sectors as well. 2 days ago, a top 10 assassin organization was taken out, and none of them survived. At least that's what the news said. The regiment sent someone to confirm the news. However, no matter what the truth is, it was a reminder to everyone that we've gotten used to living in peace for decades, and those old-timers didn't even have the power to fight back when they appeared one after another. Vanguard may not be like that, but we still need to be vigilant. Is it chaotic outside right now? Sillin asked. Not really. It's just that a few small hunter regiments and assassin organizations have suffered because of certain forces. The big four are still fine. Sillin suddenly thought of something and said, Dias's side is almost healed, but judging from the current situation, should we send someone to pick them up? The main treatment has been completed, and the next step is to spend time recovering. Since the situation is a little complicated right now, it's better to pick them up. Dias and the others had just been treated, and they weren't 100% recovered yet. No one knew if someone hostile to Vanguard would attack them on the other side. Schotten thought for a moment. That's fine. Discuss it with the other lieutenant commanders, and tell me the results. All right. After ending the communication, Sillin did not return to the house immediately. Instead, he stood at the corridor and looked at the scenery in the distance. Their trip to Sector S had failed to ignite the fire, and they had returned after wandering around for a bit. Of course, they felt discontent. Sillin Helong and his group's strength was just too weak, compared to the two veteran assassin organizations Fog and Wuxia, and that special Azrael, that even the authorities had a headache over. Sillin Helong's previous thinking was just too simple. It was only after they actually went there that they realized that there were just too few places where they could interfere. They nearly lost their lives at the Level 1 prison planet, and they were told to leave before they could do much at the Level 3 prison planet. Veteran forces were in a state of rapid development, be it comprehensive combat power or new technology research and development. Many times, they would amaze the world with a single brilliant feat right now. They were resting and recuperating at Vanguard's stronghold. According to the squad's plan, some non-essential long-distance missions were temporarily suspended until the situation stabilized. However, if they wanted to grow as quickly as possible, they had to put it into practice. Sillin went to the other lieutenant commanders and explained the situation on Dias's side. Although the lieutenant commanders expressed their approval, they were hesitant when it came to who to send. Moreover, this was the 6th B Squadron's own business. According to the rules, the A Squadron would not interfere. In a situation like this, if the A Squadron did not interfere, it would be the equivalent of losing a great protective umbrella. The danger level would also be much higher. Everyone had elite soldiers under them, but they knew what the situation outside was like, and no one wanted to test it out. They were reluctant to let these elite soldiers go after much difficulty. Sillin had expected the lieutenant commander's reactions a long time ago. He tapped his fingers on the table. Actually, I already have an idea of who to send. It's fine as long as this decision passes. Sillin, who are you going to send? Sakasha asked. Sakasha was a bit conservative when it came to this matter. Although she wanted Asha and the others to return safely as soon as possible, Sakasha was still a little hesitant about sending people out. After all, she had only taken over as a lieutenant commander for a short time, and there were some things that she was not bold enough to make. I'll lead the team myself. We don't need too many people, just a few people from our squad. Right now there aren't many healers left at Sector E, only about 50 or so. A medium-sized spaceplane will do. However, the weapons and fighter configuration of this spaceplane must be of a higher level. A spaceplane's high-level configuration is a must, Akai said. But Sillin, isn't it a little too? It's fine. If we can't even handle this, then no matter how many people we send, it'll be a waste. After a pause, Sillin smiled and said, Actually, it's mainly because they've been bored out of their minds lately, and they don't have the motivation to do anything. They might not run into any trouble after they go out, and the A Squadron's information comes from all sectors. It's only when we gather them together that we realized how serious the situation is. But we're only going to Sector E to pick them up, so it should be fine. According to the information he received so far, Sillin felt that Fog and Wuxia were mainly targeting certain assassin organizations, while Azrael continued to stay silent. As long as the three of them did not come out, it was not too serious for Vanguard. Other than that, Sillin felt that even if they ran into some trouble, it would also be a chance for the squad members to train themselves. In this era where the strong roamed, if they could not keep up, they would only be left further and further behind. This was not what Carrie and the others hoped for. In fact, Sillin could see that Carrie and the others were not in a good state of mind as of late. Tang Qiuqiu would fall asleep at the shooting range, and Yudos would often place his fingers on offensive maneuvers when he was piloting the fighter. It was a reflection of his true thoughts. Fledglings must fly eventually. After the vice commander meeting, Sillin gathered all the combat personnel of the squad and confirmed the roster mainly on a voluntary basis. Sillin led the squad consisting of Carrie, Beaver, Yudi, Xiaoshang, Ba Dao, Tang Qiuqiu, Yudos, Lycrabe, and Qifeng. If there was Yudi, there would definitely be Miantuan. If there was Tang Qiuqiu, there would definitely be Xueqiu. And if there was Sillin, there would definitely be Huimao. Carrie thought to himself that at least the food stored in the stronghold's storage cabinet would not be consumed by the three light. After confirming it, Sillin informed Shotten and left with his men in the aircraft. In a building in the A Squad's stronghold area. It really is that kid. Now in the 6th Division, he's the only one with a bit of drive. Chapter 180. This time, Sillin and the others were very low-key when they went to Sector E to pick up Diaz and the others. There were no symbolic symbols on the spaceplane, and Udo, on the other hand, had polished his emblem until it was shiny every day. Just like Tang Qiuqiu, he wore it on a chain inside his body instead of pinning it to the outside. It wasn't that he was afraid, it was just that he wanted to minimize conflicts if he could. We're going to keep a low profile this time. This was what Sillin had said before they departed. Although he had always kept a low profile, Yudos was overflowing with excitement as this was his first time participating in a mission. Lycrabe's original plan was to continue his research and development of antibiotics at the 6th Division stronghold, but since Sillin and the others were leaving, Lycrabe put his research on hold for now. This time he was going to Sector E to take a look as well. It had been so many years, and he wondered how the sector famous for its medicine had developed. Qifeng was wearing a very cute set of children's clothing. It was something Carrie bought when he went to buy new clothes for Tang Qiuqiu. Qifeng's height was about the same as Tang Qiuqiu's, and Carrie thought it looked good so he bought it together. Still, it was quite suitable for Qifeng to wear. He had to admit that Carrie did have the tendency to be a stay-at-home dad. Right now, Qifeng and Tang Qiuqiu were chatting with each other in children's clothing. Tang Qiuqiu was telling Qifeng about Diaz, and Xueqiu was lying on Tang Qiuqiu's back without falling off at all. It would seem that he had gotten used to it since a long time ago. The message had been sent to Diaz, and Diaz had probably gathered everyone by the time they arrived. According to the operation plan, it was quite simple, but there was no telling what kind of trouble they might encounter. According to the coordinates Diaz had given them, Sillin and his entourage arrived at a subdistrict planet of Sector E. This place wasn't the most central part of Sector E. Diaz's treatment was located at the central region, but he had been transferred to this planet after the core treatment. That way, they could avoid some of the troubles at the central region. After all, Diaz used to be the vice commander of Vanguard's 6th B Squadron. Together with Wuxia, the two vice commanders would be in a much more difficult situation if someone harbored ill intentions towards Vanguard. It would be better for them to come to a slightly more peaceful place to recuperate and heal in peace. Sillin parked the spaceplane at the airport's parking spot and paid the caretaker fee. Then, he led the group to the place Diaz had mentioned. As soon as they got off the aircraft, Lycrabe frowned. "It smells like medicine." Yudos shrugged. "I don't smell any medicine. I just feel a little cold." The sun was shining brightly today, but the weather felt a little solemn, oppressive and gloomy. Sector E has always been like this. It's like a huge hospital, and you've entered the hospital's door. Sillin said. Carrie and the others shuddered unconsciously. They hated the word hospital the most. It gave them goosebumps. This planet was quieter than the few planets they had passed through before. There weren't many hospitals on this planet, and most of them were branches attached to famous large hospitals. Most of them focused on advanced care. The main colors of the planet were white and green. White represented cleanliness, and green represented vitality. After exiting the port, the group appeared much quieter than before. Maybe it was because of the atmosphere here. In reality, this planet was much better than the other planets that focused on core treatment and first aid. There were joys and sorrows everywhere, and death was everywhere. The people who cried out in sorrow but were helpless would affect the mood of the people around them. Corresponding to medical treatment, the food here focused more on nutrition and conditioning. Although the taste might not be great, the emphasis was on health. Some additives were also banned here. They got off at a station on the Loop Line train, and then they had to walk the rest of the way. Other than special hospital vehicles, no other flying cars were allowed to enter the advanced care area. At first, Chiefing was a little nervous. After all, he felt that he was a little different from the others. But he gradually relaxed later on. Those who saw Chiefing were just a little curious, but they didn't pay much attention to him. After all, there were a lot of races in these well-developed places. No one would pay much attention to someone with 3 pairs of hands like Ba Dao. There were plenty of people with long tails. Although normal humans were still the majority on these planets, no one would pay too much attention as long as they weren't too strange. Since he wouldn't be treated as a monster, Chi Feng also started to become active. He looked curiously at the surrounding buildings and the white robots and flying cars in the air. Oh, it's here. Sillin pointed to a door and said. The door plate on the door was clearly marked. It was the affiliated rehabilitation center that Diaz had given them. Diaz and a few other people were all here for the later stages of rehabilitation. After the identity scan, Sillin and his party entered the rehabilitation center area. But isn't this rehabilitation center too big? Xiaoshang stared. Looking around, there was a wide lawn, endless scattered buildings, rattan trellises, woods, wooden benches, gardens, and so on. When the patients were bored, they would come out to relax and exercise their hands and feet. It seems that these patients are in a good mood. Xiaoshang said. Ba Dao glanced at him. Then you can come often in the future. Then forget it. According to the detailed address given by Diaz, after Sillin and the others learned the distribution of the buildings from a navigation robot, the navigation robot took them to Area 16, where Diaz was located. There were many areas in the rehabilitation center, and each area had a set of corresponding facilities, wards, staff, and so on. The division of the areas was actually just separated by some small fences, and it was not very enclosed. Sometimes people from different areas would gather together to talk. The rehabilitation center was originally relatively monotonous, and it would be boring if there was no one to talk to. After the navigation robot took them to Area 16, it left. Sillin looked for the room number given by Diaz, but he didn't see anyone. He asked the person in charge here, and they said that he probably went out to do something, or went out to relax and didn't come back. In the rehabilitation center, as long as the patient's condition was out of danger, the restrictions on the patients were not strict, and the patients would have a high degree of freedom. Of course, they must come back at night. Let's go sit outside and eat something while we wait. Sillin looked at the time and said. They all agreed, but they didn't seem to have much appetite. After all, in this kind of place, although it was only a rehabilitation center, it still affected them, and they always felt depressed. Area 16 had a dedicated F&B department, but it wasn't time to eat now, so there weren't many people there. Sillin and his group found a big table near the woods, and ordered a few dishes to eat first. They chatted for a while, and a person came to a small round table not far away. To be exact, it was a tall beauty, and her long hair was casually tied into a bun at the back. Her facial features were a little deep, and the corners of her eyes were slightly raised. She always looked like she was smiling, and she didn't have the kind of weakness that ordinary women had. She had a heroic spirit, and she was quite imposing. She wore a white medical coat, and she didn't look like a nurse, but more like a doctor. Wow, an angel in white, Xiaoshang said sneakily. Not a bad figure, Carrie and the others agreed. The angel in white also looked up at Silin and his group. Without any extra expression, he retracted his gaze, sat down, and reached into his coat pocket to take out a palm-sized white rabbit. The rabbit's ears were drooping, and it should be that breed. After the rabbit was placed on the table, it was still a little groggy, and it should have just woken up. After the angel in white put the rabbit down, he ordered some dishes from the service robot that flew over. Not long after, the service robot sent the dishes to the table. In fact, there were only 3 plates that were sent to the table. A plate of fresh carrots, white radishes, red radishes, and other radishes, a plate of simple mixed grain buns, and a large plate of beautifying pig's trotters that shouldn't be called a basin. They didn't know what breed of pig it was, but one of its trotters was like a watermelon. There were at least 8 trotters on the plate, and they were covered with sauce. It should have been very beautiful, but Silin and the others felt like their stomachs were cramping. After seeing the plate of radishes, the rabbit was full of energy, and happily jumped to the side of the plate and started eating. Her small teeth and her trademark 3-petaled mouth were grinding, and she ate with great enthusiasm. As for the angel in white, he picked up a mixed grain buns and ate them in one bite. Then, he took out his knife and fork and started eating the large beautifying pig's trotters. It had to be said that the angel in white's fingers were very beautiful, and using the knife had become a kind of art. She used the knife nimbly and neatly cut off the meat from the large pig's trotters. Then she used a fork to pick up the meat and sent it to her mouth. Many people didn't use a knife when eating pig's trotters because they found it troublesome. But now looking at the angel in white using a knife, it felt very comfortable, and it made people feel that this was how it should be eaten. Of course, if it was someone else, it would be different. The reason why this scene was so beautiful was because of the person using the knife. Basically, the few of them just watched the angel in white and her rabbit eat, and they didn't eat much of the food on the table. Half an hour later, a large plate of beautifying pig's trotters was finished. The angel in white elegantly picked up a napkin and wiped her mouth. Then she took the drink that the service robot brought over and closed it. Opposite her, the rabbit still had a quarter of the carrots that hadn't been finished, and it would probably be finished by the time she finished the drink in the cup. "Hi, beautiful." Xiaoshang was quite direct, and when he saw the angel looking over, he greeted. But this greeting was full of frivolity. "Hi, handsome guys." The angel in white replied with a smile. Even though it was something similar, but the aura was too strong, and Xiaoshang's smile was a little stiff. "Nice knife skills." Silin raised his cup and gestured, and then he drank the wine in the cup in one gulp. The angel in white just smiled and casually took a sip. Silin didn't care, and he looked at Lycrabe. He knew what Lycrabe was thinking. It seemed that the so-called recovery area wasn't that peaceful. "You just finished the surgery?" Lycrabe asked. He didn't smile, but frowned slightly. "Why did you have to do such an emergency surgery in the recovery area?" Hearing Lycrabe's words, the angel in white looked over with some surprise. From the expressions of Silin and the others, it could be seen that Silin and Lycrabe had already guessed that she had just had an external surgery. As for Carrie and the others, they also looked over with surprise. The angel in white nodded. "Yes, actually there are no absolutes in the recovery area. Although in theory, the patient is out of danger and only needs post-treatment and rehabilitation training, nothing is absolute. It depends on the person, and it varies from person to person." "In that case, you're a very good doctor," Silin praised. Although this woman had changed her coat, the smell of medicine was still there. It was a few surgeries that were needed for emergency treatment and major surgery. Moreover, those kinds of surgeries were very exhausting, and even robots couldn't replace them. It was no wonder that this woman ate a big plate of food after the surgery. However, Celine guessed that this woman should be the chief surgeon. Even if she was not the chief surgeon, she was still a very important assistant. It must be said that it was very rare for someone to have such ability at such a young age. She was brimming with talent. In response to Silin's praise, the angel in white didn't be modest. She smiled and nodded, continuing to drink from the cup. Now Callie and the others mostly admired her. Although they didn't like to hear the word doctor most of the time, it was true that they mostly admired her. Moreover, they were combat personnel who were often injured, and they knew the value of a good doctor. Carrie, Xiaoshang, and the others gave Silin a look. Tried to poach her, deputy captain. She was a talent, and they were in urgent need of talents. Although Lycrabe would sometimes make a guest appearance as a doctor, his main profession was a pharmacist. As for things like surgery, he rarely did it. Therefore, he was very supportive of recruiting a doctor. However, the problem was that even if she was a very experienced doctor, not to mention whether she was willing to give up her job here to join Vanguard, the consideration of her character was a big problem. A shrewd doctor could unknowingly cause a person's death. And it seemed to be just an accident. She would be completely out of the circle of responsibility. Naturally, Silin knew the stakes involved, and so did Callie and the others, so they didn't continue to say anything. At this moment, a noise came from not far away. It was obvious that a few young people were surrounding an old man and a child. The young man in the lead pointed at a stain on his sleeve and said loudly. He was very domineering, and his vulgar words flowed out. He must have said similar things on a daily basis. The other young people punched and kicked the old man who was lying on the ground. The old man protected the child in his arms, and the child was already sobbing. Many people around saw this scene, but no one came out to stop them. They didn't even dare to look at the young man in the lead, and left in a hurry. Fuck, how can there be such people? Carrie stood up and prepared to go over. Xiaoshang and the others also prepared to stand up. I advise you not to cause trouble, or more people will suffer, the angel in white said. Why? Silin asked. Although people with a discerning eye knew that this was only a small matter, it should be that the child accidentally touched the young man's sleeve while playing football, and the young man's sleeve was dirty, which caused him to be beaten up. Actually, as long as you don't intervene, he can just beat them up, and no one will die. Moreover, the old man and the child will receive better treatment later. However, if you intervene, not only will you not be able to save the old man and the child, you will also get yourself into big trouble. Carrie's eyebrows were knitted together. He never liked these twists and turns. Silin patted Carrie and asked him to sit down. Xiaoshang and the others also sat down again, and looked at the development of the other side with dissatisfaction. The angel in white looked at Silin with some surprise. She didn't expect the leader of this group to be such a young guy, and he was far calmer than the others. Suddenly, the beauty in white thought of something. She carefully looked at Silin and the others again, and her gaze made them start to have goosebumps. Cough that, who is that bastard? Carrie said to divert his attention. Retracting her gaze, the white-clothed beauty smiled in disdain. The crown prince of this region went overboard playing with women, and got himself into trouble. Thus, he was sent here by his father to seek refuge. But while he managed to seek refuge, the people in the rehabilitation center suffered. If I were his old man, I would have killed him a long time ago, Carrie said mercilessly, and he even pinched his fingers a few times as if he felt something. There are a lot of people who wanted to kill him, but none of them succeeded. The angel in white pointed at the robots floating in the air. Some were service type, and some were navigation type. These robots will sometimes turn into hardcore bodyguards. After all, this rehabilitation center was opened by his old man, and he's very protective of his precious son. Also, they have a lot of connections with the higher-ups of the famous hospital in Sector E attached to it. As long as he doesn't kill anyone, those people won't make a sound. Then are we being monitored if we badmouth him right now? Beaver looked around. The restaurant service robot's eyes were flashing, but they were mainly looking in that direction and no longer paid attention to the people at the table. It's fine as long as we don't fight. There are a lot of people who badmouth him. If that's the case, then why do so many people come here for rehabilitation treatment when they know this guy's character? Silin asked. Because it's cheap for the patients, and high for the doctors. The beauty in white answered. It was true that this was a very practical problem. For people who were short of funds and poor conditions, this place was undoubtedly a very good choice. Didn't they say that evil will be rewarded with evil? Tang Qiuqiu said. This was a phrase she learned later on, and although it was sneered at by many people, she still remembered it very clearly. Evil will be rewarded with evil? The beauty in white smiled, but the meaning in her eyes was unclear. She said in a low voice, "Maybe." The beating was finally over, and an old man and a young man were carried away by a few medical staff. According to the beauty in white, they would receive better treatment for free. The young leader was still cursing. He accepted a cup of water from his lackey and gulped it down abruptly. However, because he drank too quickly, he choked. This choking was endless. In the end, because he choked too much, he was rushed to the emergency room by the medical staff. On the dining table in front of the beauty in white, the little rabbit shook her drooping ears and jumped onto the chair. Then, she jumped onto the ground and glanced at the beauty in white before leaving. The beauty in white looked at the remaining carrots on the plate and ignored the little rabbit who jumped away. However, the corner of her lips curled slightly, and her eyes were deep. Carrie looked at the rabbit and was about to say something, but Sillin signaled him with his eyes. He shook his head and continued to eat. 5 minutes later, there was a commotion over there. Whether it was the doctors or the nurses, they all looked as if it was the end of the world. And the little rabbit jumped back at some point, jumped onto the chair, and then jumped onto the table to eat the remaining carrots. Chapter 181. Many doctors in white uniforms rushed over from other areas of the rehabilitation center. Their foreheads were covered in sweat, but they didn't even bother to wipe it off. They rushed into the rehabilitation center in a much more urgent manner than usual. A few young nurses were so anxious that they cried. The building was probably packed with people. Some of the doctors and nurses who didn't manage to squeeze in were pacing around anxiously. They looked inside from time to time and asked the people around them, "What happened over there?" Carrie asked. The few of them looked at the beauty in white. The question was directed at her. However, the beauty in white shrugged, indicating that she didn't know either. Sillin and the others looked at the beauty in white with a strange expression. Then they looked at the rabbit that was chewing on a carrot. They had a feeling that they knew something. Huimao stared at the white rabbit on the table not far away. He could confirm that this small white rabbit was indeed similar to a normal rabbit. Its physique could only be considered healthy, but it wasn't super quality like Shueqiu. There was also no abnormal energy fluctuation on its body. In conclusion, this was a normal lop-eared rabbit. However, this fellow that was no different from a normal rabbit gave Huimao a strange feeling. He couldn't explain why, but it was extremely strange. Sillin also looked at the rabbit on the table. If he wasn't mistaken, the rabbit's eyes were still a little red when it came back. It only slowly turned black when it jumped onto the chair. This rabbit was definitely related to what happened over there. However, since the beauty in white didn't admit it, they wouldn't ask further. 10 minutes later, an aircraft flew over. It even knocked off a corner of the building without anyone saying anything. Then, a long canister was carried out from the building's facade. Sillin and the others only saw the canister being carried up. However, there were many people blocking the way, so they couldn't see what exactly it was. "What is that?" Xiaoshang asked. The beauty in white didn't explain. Instead, it was Lycrabe who explained it. In layman's terms, it's a device that can seal a dying person inside while maintaining the state they were in before they were sealed. Sometimes, when the injured person isn't in a place that has rescue drugs or equipment, and the doctors are at their wits' end, they will seal the injured person in a canister like this and transport them to a suitable place for subsequent rescue. "So there's a dying person in the tube?" Carrie asked. Lycrabe looked at the aircraft in the distance. It could be a dying person, or it could be someone whose heart stopped beating not long ago. Then could it be? Xiaoshang saw the service robot that had just left came back into the shop. He didn't finish his sentence, but gave it a look. Everyone knew who Xiaoshang was referring to. The young man who had been arrogant and domineering was sent in after choking on his water. As they were talking, Sillin caught a glimpse of a figure. "Diaz is coming." Where? Hearing Sillin's words, Carrie and Xiaoshang stopped discussing and quickly looked around. Two people walked over from afar, a man and a woman, holding each other's arms. It was Diaz and Asha. Vice Captain. Ahem, Brother Diaz. Carrie smiled and changed the way he addressed them out of habit. He stood up and ran over. Carrie, Beaver, and the others went over to greet them. Sillin added a few dishes suitable for recovering patients, and added a few stools. Long time no see. Diaz came over and gave Sillin a big hug. I went out for a stroll and missed you. The broken arm had already been redirected and differentiated, and the recovery was going well. There were a few ways to regrow a severed arm. One could use the body's specific tissue cells to carry out tissue culture, complete the formation of an arm outside the body, and then reattach it with surgery. There was also in situ polycloning, but those were all induced outside the body. In order to achieve the perfect reconstruction of the arm, Lung chose the most painful method, which was the directional differentiation of the main body. During the core therapy, Diaz's severed arm would undergo directional induction. In order to accurately induce the shape of the arm, anesthesia could not be injected. The main body would have to endure all the pain brought about by the induction. Not everyone could endure that kind of pain, so many people preferred to go for external induction. However, the directional induction of the main body would allow the new arm to be more compatible with the main body. As a hunter, it was obvious that Diaz would benefit from this method. Sillin gave a thumbs up. True man. Carrie, Beaver, and Xiaoshang also agreed. True man. However, no matter how one looked at them, their gazes were extremely perverted. They were still scanning back and forth between Diaz and Asha. After Asha glared at them with a straight face, they finally became more serious. However, Asha's face was obviously flushed. Even though she was keeping a straight face, she did not have her usual imposing manner anymore. When Asha was not paying attention, the others winked at Diaz with an expression that said, "We all know." "Io, my dear little sugar ball, I missed you so much." Diaz picked up Tang Qiuqiu and tossed her up. This is really a bear. I thought it was a bear-shaped backpack." Diaz looked at Qiuqiu, who was on Tang Qiuqiu's back. He smiled and reached out his hand to rub Qiuqiu's head and pinched its round ears. It feels good. I wonder how much food did it eat to get this fat." Qiuqiu grinned. "Hello, big brother Diaz." This time Diaz and Asha were shocked. Even the beauty in white looked at it curiously. It could actually talk. This made Qiuqiu's grin even wider. Don't be fooled by this guy's face. He's actually a bad guy, as bad as the Miantuan. Carrie sneered. The Miantuan opened its mouth and jumped on Yudi's shoulder. It seemed to be refuting Carrie's words, but Carrie ignored it. Therefore, when Carrie picked up the spoon to scoop up the meatball, the Miantuan popped out its long tongue and snatched the meatball away. After eating it, it smacked its lips and hid behind Beaver's neck to show off to Carrie. "Diarrhea, you'll die," Carrie said angrily. However, the Miantuan was a variant of the chameleon species. It had no fear of raw or cooked meat. Otherwise, it wouldn't have encouraged Hui Mao and the rest to pry open Carrie's storage cabinets. Sillin then introduced Yudos, Lycrabe, and Chiefing to Diaz. Diaz was very satisfied, sincerely satisfied. People who could satisfy Diaz gave Beaver, and the rest a reassurance. "Alright, let's sit down and talk. Boss, if there's anything else you want to eat, just order it. I'll pay for it today." Sillin smiled. "Yeah, brother, sister-in-law, what do you want to eat?" Before Carrie could finish his sentence, Asha glared at him with a red face. Although Carrie didn't say anything, he was still smiling. Diaz and Asha didn't sit down immediately. Instead, they looked at the beauty in white. In fact, Sillin had already noticed Diaz and Asia's attitude towards the white-clothed beauty, who was sitting there calmly without the slightest intention of avoiding suspicion. Since Diaz didn't say anything, it meant that they actually knew each other. Sure enough, Diaz smiled and pointed at the beauty in white. He said to Sillin and the rest, "This is Dr. Meg Nicole Tico. She's a very good doctor. It's all thanks to her that my arm recovered so quickly." After saying that, Diaz turned to Tico. "Tico, come over and share a table." Tico, the beauty in white, looked at the white rabbit that was gnawing on the last bit of radish and replied, "Forget it, you guys eat first. I'll go back after Little White finishes eating. I just had a major operation and need to rest. Then we'll talk after you've rested." "All right." Tico scooped up the white rabbit that had finished eating the radish and put it back into the big pocket of her white overalls. She said goodbye to Diaz and left. Wow, brother Diaz, is that beauty really that good? Xiaoshang came over and asked. You little rascals, don't worry about it. Diaz laughed and scolded them. At the same time, he winked at them, telling them to talk when they got back. Therefore, at the dinner table, they only talked about Diaz's treatment and the condition of the others. Hearing that everyone was recovering well, the atmosphere at the dinner table was quite relaxed. After dinner, the few of them gathered in Diaz's ward. Although it was called a ward, in fact, in the rehabilitation center, the patients' wards were similar to apartments. It wasn't crowded for more than 10 people to move around in it. After sitting down, Diaz said, When I came back, I heard some rumors that something happened to the Crown Prince here. He was sent to the main hospital for treatment. Yes, we've all been watching this. Sillin told Diaz about what happened at the time. The whole process was witnessed by us and Dr. Tico, but Dr. Tico's rabbit ran out. Hearing Sillin mention the rabbit, Asha, who was massaging Diaz, smiled. It doesn't look like there's anything special about the white rabbit, Carrie said. He was mainly thinking about the rabbit's appetite. The radish on the plate was not much, just a little bit, not even enough to fill the gaps between Xueqiu and Huimao's teeth. However, the rabbit ate for so long. This should be the appetite of a normal rabbit, right? The others also opened their ears to listen. If that's the case, the Crown Prince definitely won't survive, Diaz said with certainty. Oh, Sillin was very curious about this. Just like Wheeze, he couldn't tell what was so strange about the rabbit. In terms of physique, the rabbit was different from an alien beast. It couldn't even jump a meter high, and it couldn't withstand blades, spears, or clubs. However, Sillin just felt that the rabbit was very strange. Diaz was silent for a while, then said, You all know that I'm an atheist, but there are some things in this world that science can't explain. Maybe the current technology hasn't reached the level to explain the causes, but no matter what, there are some things about the rabbit that are difficult to explain. So supernatural. The few of them were even more curious. Huimao, who was lying on top of Sillin, sat up, his ears perked up. Diaz didn't explain directly. Instead, he asked, In the myth of creation, there was a guardian mentioned. Do you know about it? Sillin nodded, but Qifeng, Huimao, and Xueqiu didn't know about it. Looking at Yudo's and Tang Qiuqiu's expressions, he didn't understand either. Sillin explained, In the myth of creation, the guardian will stay by the side of those who have committed the most heinous crimes and take away their souls so that they can no longer do evil. So you're saying? Carrie felt a chill down his spine. It's definitely not as supernatural as in the myth of creation, but the outcome of this rabbit's appearance is similar. Just like you said, how could the Crown Prince choke to death from drinking water? How could he not be saved with so many medical equipment and experienced doctors? Diaz said, If it's not taking away the soul, then what is it? Xiaoshang asked, shaking off the goosebumps on his body. Coincidence. Coincidence? Yes, as long as the rabbit exists, there will always be coincidences of one kind or another. Usually, these coincidences won't be taken seriously, but when all these coincidences are gathered together, the impact is far greater than people can imagine. It could be a problem with the trachea, throat, lungs, heart, and so on. It could also be some drug resistance or allergy in the body. No matter what it is, when all these coincidences are gathered together, the person is not far from death. Isn't that rabbit too strange? Why don't we go and pray to the gods? Carrie said. I remember there's a sentence at the end of the myth of creation. In a materialistic world, idealistic people, Sillin said. Diaz smiled helplessly. Indeed, we don't believe in ghosts, but some things are not certain. It's just like how people emphasize luck and emphasize that good will be rewarded and evil will be punished. So when Asha and I first learned about the rabbit, we were very conflicted. That rabbit really didn't do anything? Sillin asked. Asha, who was massaging Diaz's arm, paused for a moment and continued what she was doing. Diaz continued. Let me tell you something. Asha and I saw it with our own eyes. One night, because Asha and I couldn't sleep, We went out to the corridor under the pergola to have a heart-to-heart talk. We talked about the 6th division. The night sky outside was beautiful, and there were many bright planets. We looked at the night sky, but Asha suddenly saw a white figure. Then, we saw the little rabbit crawl along the protruding eaves of the first floor to a window on the 2nd floor. It stayed there until we heard an alarm from inside. An alarm. It was an alarm system that automatically sounded when a patient's life was in danger. Then the little rabbit left. Not long after, there was news that the person inside accidentally fell and hit his head when he woke up at night to go to the toilet and died. Throughout the whole process, the rabbit didn't come into contact with the person at all. After that, we got closer to Tico and learned more about the rabbit. A chill ran down Silen's spine as he listened to Dia's words. It was really just a rabbit, a weak rabbit that anyone could pinch to death. But wasn't this too strange? Then the person inside is also a bad guy? Silen asked. Indeed, he deserves to die, Asha said. Even Asha, who usually didn't like to talk, said so. It was definitely not a normal bad guy. Big brother, do you think people like us who have killed countless souls will attract the attention of that rabbit? Carrie could feel the hairs on his body stiffening. Dia said unhappily, Aren't I the same? But I haven't seen the rabbit do anything for a long time. Other than Carrie, the others all heaved a sigh of relief. So, I think the rabbit has its own judgment. Just like the beast demon in the myth of creation. Beast demon? Carrie had a strange expression on his face. I've never seen a beast demon, but I know a few that are similar. Carrie pointed out. Hui Mao Miantuan, Xueqiu and Qifeng all looked at Carrie. Carrie felt the hair on his body stand on end. Let's not talk about the rabbit. Silen pulled everyone back from their thoughts and asked Dias. Actually, big brother Dias, you're saying this for another reason, right? Dias nodded approvingly. The reason why I'm telling you all this is so you can understand Tico and the rabbit around her better. Don't be surprised or say something inappropriate when the time comes. If everything goes according to plan, Tico will be one of us soon. Oh, we're finally going to have a beauty in our team. Xiaoshang cried. Hearing Dias's words, everyone was elated. Not only did they have another eye-catching beauty, but this beauty was also a doctor, a young but experienced doctor. This was a good thing for the entire 6th division. A good doctor was harder to find than a good combatant. Logically speaking, with Dr. Tico's ability, she should be earning a good salary here, right? Why did she leave to join the hunter group? Silen asked. They had always believed in Dias's judgment. Dias's judgment of people was not something that could be explained by science. Sometimes, Dias would get lost, but he was very good at reading people. Silen was actually not interested in the reason why Tico joined the hunter group, but just because he did not care did not mean that the others did not care. He only asked this question to clear everyone's doubts so that they could get along better in the future. She doesn't want to stay here anymore. We discussed this in detail after we came here for treatment and met Tico. I won't go into details about what happened in the middle. She seems to be a little tired of this place and said that she would rather be a hunter. However, Tico said that she wanted to give it a try first. If she thinks it's okay, she will officially join. Isn't our team lacking doctors? Lycrabe's main profession is a pharmacist, and with Tico, it'll be even better. By the way, how's our team's combat power right now? Not bad. Everyone is improving, and there's a new member joining us. Besides, that white fatty isn't just for show. It would be strange if his combat power didn't increase, Silen said. As expected, you are more suitable for that position than I am. Dias patted Silen's shoulder and said sincerely, with you around, I can relax a lot. During his time as the sole vice-captain, Dias had always been depressed. In fact, not long after he became the vice-captain, he knew that he was not suitable for the position. He had been looking for a suitable candidate until Silen joined the 6th team. Hey Carrie, what are you laughing about? Dias laughed and kicked Carrie, who had his head lowered and was laughing. About that, I was thinking after Dr. Tico joined us, Rabbit joined us too. If that's the case then, Let me give you an example. Let's say the enemy sniper was going to shoot you in the heart, but his hand twitched and he missed. Carrie said happily. Everyone fell silent. Chapter 182. The other members of the 6th Division who came to Sector E with Diaz for treatment also sent messages one after another. They said that they would gather at this planet's port in a day, and return to Sector K together. After chatting with everyone for a while, Diaz called Sillin to find Tico. The others rested in Diaz's ward, and Asha went to handle the paperwork to leave the rehabilitation center. Diaz had become much more restrained after he became friends with Asha. He was no longer as frivolous as before, at least on the surface. He did not wink or whistle when he saw a beautiful nurse. He looked like a gentleman. You've become much more restrained. Sillin teased. Cough, it can't be helped. People with families are helpless. That was what he said, but Diaz had a smug look on his face. Smug my ass. Sillin shot him a disdainful glance and continued. If that's the case, when are we going to hold a proper wedding? We may be in a relationship now, but it's not good without a title. Asha's culture should value this a lot, right? When the time comes, we can call her sister-in-law. Yes, that's a must. But Asha is alone, and my brother is the only direct relative I have. After some discussion, we decided to hold the ceremony at the 6th Division's base in Vanguard's headquarters. Diaz sighed and continued. Although I lost my arm because of Asha, Asha has been by my side all this time, especially during the core treatment. I couldn't even move for many days, and Asha was the one who took care of me. She didn't mind it and took care of me personally. You see, for people like us who are constantly on the edge of danger, it's enough to have someone take care of us all the time. I have my own reasons for not wanting to be a lieutenant commander, but Asha did give up the position because of me. Before this, I was planning to accompany her to the famous scenic spots of the various sectors after our wedding. I've seen the little garden you and Chocho went to, and I really want to go. But now the plan has to change. Asha's idea is to at least wait until the situation has completely stabilized. And only then will there be a chance. We can't take any risks. Sillin nodded. Right now he didn't know what the situation at Sector S was like. The A-team hadn't made any public information, and the major media inside the League of Stars had only described it in a few words. The real core of the situation was very vague. Suddenly remembering something, Diaz stopped in his tracks. He undid the top 2 buttons of his shirt and pulled them down, revealing a tattoo on his chest. Sillin's mouth twitched. Asha's name was tattooed on Diaz's chest. Judging from the handwriting, it wasn't Diaz's handwriting. Diaz was so happy that his eyebrows were raised. Asha did it herself. In other words, Asha tattooed my name on the same spot. Holy shit, this is so mushy. Sillin shook off the goosebumps on his body, and pretended not to see the expression on Diaz's face that said jealous of me, right? Jealous of me, right? You worship me now, right? Oh right, there's something I need to ask you. Diaz suddenly put on a straight face and said. What is it? Do you know Yu Linglong of the Yu family? Sillin frowned and nodded a little helplessly. You know the Yu family, don't you? I don't know much about them. When I was in Seven Lights, I only knew that her name was Linglong, but I didn't know that her surname was Yu. I heard some people talk about her later, but the only thing I know is that the Yu family has great influence on the political scene of the entire League of Stars. It's not just the political scene. The Yu family is inextricably linked to the military, business, and academia. Rumor has it that one of the Heavenly Edict 4 generals is surnamed Yu. Sillin's pupils shrank. This was the first time he had heard such detailed information about the Heavenly Edict 4 generals. If one of the Heavenly Edict 4 generals was surnamed Yu, then the Yu family was far more complicated than he imagined. No wonder Lung didn't want to provoke them. At this point, Diaz's expression turned odd. He looked at Sillin carefully and said, You can't be considered handsome right now. In fact, you're not even as handsome as I am. How did the little princess of the Yu family fall for you? Is it because of her first impression? You looked like a pretty boy back then. Sillin did not say anything. He did not want to dwell on this topic. Sillin did not want to talk about it, but Diaz was not going to let it go. Sai Kid, the Yu family girl has helped us a lot. She's partly the reason why we could receive treatment so smoothly and peacefully. There was only one best medical area in Sector E, and most of the core healers were there. There were so many people in the League of Stars, so Dias's group might not necessarily run into big trouble, but there should be a lot of small frictions. However, Dias ran into Yu Linglong while he was receiving treatment at Sector E. In reality, Yu Linglong was the one who volunteered to help him. Only Dias and Asha knew about this. The rest of the 6th squad did not know about Yu Linglong's appearance, and they had wondered how the treatment went so smoothly. Listening to Dias's words, Sillin sighed on the inside. I guess I owe that girl one. I know that the girl only helped you because of you. Otherwise, with her background, there's no need for her to bow down to anyone, not even the Big Four, let alone people like us who aren't even members of the A-Team. That being said, the A-Team might not be higher than us in her eyes. Dias let out a low chuckle and patted Sillin's shoulder. You're not bad, kid. You even managed to get your hands on someone from the Yu family. Big brother, you're using vulgar words again. Ahem, I'll be vulgar once in a while. We're people with families, so we can't be vulgar all the time. That being said, although the Yu family is a complicated family, no one can interfere in matters of the heart. You know, I may not be good at other things, but I'm a good judge of character. That girl from the Yu family is serious about you. As for how the A-Team will think of you in the future, don't mind it. If you really like you, don't care what other people think of you. We'll see. They stopped talking about Yu Linglong. Dias had only mentioned it to Sillin because Yu Linglong had helped him before. Yu Linglong's help was for Sillin to see, so if he didn't mention it, it would be too disappointing for the girl. The building that Dr. Tico lived in was a separate building that was more than 100 floors tall. Doctors like her were treated quite well here, and the living space was also quite large. When Dias and Sillin came to visit, Tico had just woken up from her nap. Dias and Sillin had previously imagined a single woman's apartment. Based on Tico's personality and style, it should be neat and tidy, and the decorations should be very practical. In fact, it was indeed neat and practical, with nothing fancy about it. However, the tidiness and practicality made Sillin Helong feel a little horrified. There were anatomical diagrams of organs on the wall, and there were three-dimensional models of the skeleton and overall muscle structure as decoration. The curtains and other things were printed with molecular formulas, which were the drugs that were important to the patient during and after the surgery. There were three-dimensional patterns on the floor, which were large sections of antibodies. It was unknown who the antibodies belonged to. In short, Sillin and Dias stood at the door, their eyelids twitching, and they didn't make a sound. What's wrong? Are you scared? Tico handed them 2 glasses of water to calm them down. Dr. Tico, you're too unique. Dias smiled sheepishly. Sillin quickly accepted it. He looked around and saw that the rabbit was sleeping in a small specially made room. The white fur on its body could be seen through the round hole in the door. It was much quieter than the average rabbit. When Dias and Sillin came in, the rabbit only moved a little and didn't respond. It was probably sleeping again. If one didn't know about those mysterious things, no one would think that this rabbit was anything special. All right, let's get down to business. Tico had always been swift and decisive, and she didn't like to talk nonsense. After hearing Tico's words, Dias didn't delay any longer. He put down the glass and pointed at Sillin. Sillin, I believe you've already guessed it. Since it was time for them to know each other, there was no need to say too much and went straight to the point. Dr. Tico, Brother Dias has already told me about your situation, but before you make a decision, I'd like to make a few points clear. Tico looked at Sillin and didn't say anything, waiting for him to continue. In a hunter regiment, especially a B squadron like ours that is still developing, even the best doctors don't get much of a fixed salary. Everyone in the regiment has a fixed salary, and most of them rely on their characters to earn it. They don't get a stable and high salary like here. I don't care about that. I've saved up enough money over the years, Tico said. Also, there are many rules in the regiment. This is something Dias has already told me. It's fine, I'll abide by it. In Vanguard, you can have more freedom, but there's absolutely no room for betrayal. This is something everyone who joins a hunter regiment must know. Of course, I don't like traitors either. After saying a few more things, Scylla noticed that Tico had done some research on the rules of a hunter regiment, and had even thought about some of her future plans. This person was well prepared. All right, I'm glad that you're joining Vanguard Division 6. Oh right, I can only recommend you as a vice captain. When the time comes, the captain of the 6th Division and the other vice captains will decide on your official qualifications. Also, there will be a few other squads that you'll have to choose from. I'll choose you. I'm quite satisfied with your squad, Tico said with a smile. And Whitey will have a companion. Their squad had the most animals in the 6th Division, and none of them were simple animals. Someone once joked that in the 6th Division, it was better to offend the humans than the animals there. Then there's nothing else, Scylla said and looked at Dias. Dias shook his head, indicating that he had nothing else to add. When are you leaving? Tomorrow. After explaining the meeting time and arrangements, Tico promised that she would be there on time. There was no way Tico was going to openly travel with Dias and the others here. If he left with them after resigning, then his men would definitely have objections, and might even cause trouble for him. Tico hated those cynical and hypocritical bastards the most, but they just had to be the ones in charge. The next day, at the appointed time, Scylla and the others waited in front of the aircraft at the port. The people from the 6th Division also arrived one after another. Tico was very punctual. She was wearing a dark trench coat and glasses. The rabbit should be in her pocket. After confirming that everyone had arrived, Scylla asked Beaver and the others to start the aircraft and prepare to leave. Not long after Scylla's aircraft left, a person stood at the port not far from where their aircraft had been parked. At the same time, he turned on his communicator and said, "Tell Miss that they've left safely. You'll be responsible for the rest." Scylla and the others' flight was very smooth. They originally thought that they would run into some trouble, but in fact, it was unbelievably smooth. Carrie and Yudos were still sighing at each other. They thought that they would have to fight when they came out. Even if they ran into some small fry, it would still be good. Their hands were itching, really itching. Scylla did not say anything. Dias and Asha did not continue the topic either. They discussed the possible future plans of the 6th Division with everyone else. Huimao lay on Scylla's shoulder and swept Scylla's face with his tail. "What's wrong? Are you pretending to be deep?" Scylla carried Huimao down from his shoulder and placed him in his arms. Huimao was about to continue asking questions, but Scylla's scratching of his chin made him feel very comfortable. He let out a purr and rubbed his head, feeling sleepy. Scylla scratched Weeze's chin. "You're thinking about something." The smoother their trip was, the stronger the Yu family was. Although Yu Linglong might not be able to mobilize a lot of forces, it was enough for them to pass through Sector E. In fact, it wasn't just Sector E. Their journey from Sector E to Sector K was very smooth. They did not run into any unusual situations. Sometimes, the border between sectors was pretty chaotic. At the very least, there were robbers, and as long as they didn't look like a big force, a single spaceplane or carrier could be intercepted. But this time they clearly saw 2 starships approaching them with bad intentions, but they left soon after. This caused Carrie to sigh for a long time. In fact, it wasn't just Carrie. A lot of people who were receiving recovery treatment were itching to do something. After all, they had been idle for a long time, and it was only natural that they were itching to do something. Dias and Asha had lectured them about their mood. This was a critical period, so why the hell were they itching to do something? If they really were itching to do something, then they could go spar with the other squads after they returned to Sector K. Chifeng and Shueqiu didn't think it was a pity. They didn't feel much if they didn't run into a chaotic battle. This was their first time participating in a mission, and although they felt that the mission was dangerous at first, they felt that it was relatively easy later on. Still, they couldn't help but be excited. Just look at how Chifeng was wagging his tail, and it was obvious just how happy he was. After returning to Sector K and the stronghold without a hitch, the people who received medical treatment were all very excited. They immediately went to catch up with their friends after they returned. There were a lot of people who were shocked by Scylla's easy mission. When they saw that there wasn't even a big scratch on the spaceplane, they knew that this trip was one hell of a stroke of luck. However, before Scylla could discuss Dr. Tico's problem with the lieutenant commanders, A communication call from the A Squadron summoned him away. What's wrong? Who told you to go over? Diaz asked. After a moment of silence, Sillin answered, Nada. Nada, the former commander of the 3rd B Squadron. He was arrested during the incident 50 years ago and imprisoned in Sector S's prison. Since Nada was already at the A Squadron stronghold, it meant that the people at Sector S had completed their mission well and brought Nada back safely. Nada, the person who had a deep relationship with Enji and Komunidin. Why did he come looking for him the moment he returned from Sector S? With Sillin's current status as a lieutenant commander, he couldn't enter the A Squadron stronghold without a pass. Therefore, Nada had told him that Falvi would be coming to fetch him. As Nada's son and the current commander of the 3rd B Squadron, Falvi had the same right of passage as Shatten. Falvi flew a plane over, and there was A Squadron's emblem on it. Nada was probably the one who had the right to move a plane like this. When they saw Falvi, some of the 6th Squad people were shocked. Everyone knew about the squad leaders of Vanguard, not to mention that Falvi never had a good attitude towards the people of other squads. In fact, Falvi's face was pretty expressionless to begin with, and wearing the title of a squad leader made him look very mature and authoritative. However, according to the people of the 3rd Squad, Falvi treated them pretty well. Falvi was as expressionless as the rumors said, but the fact that he was able to get off the plane and say a few words to Sillin was already an incredible feat. Diaz felt that if it were any other lieutenant commander, Falvi probably wouldn't even get off the plane. He would have just said it on the plane. It probably wasn't Falvi's own will, but Nada's order. It was true that Falvi was still puzzled even now. He had risked his life to rescue his father safely, and the battle at Sector S's 5-level prison was simply too intense. Of the 10 A Squadron people sent out, 4 were heavily injured and almost lost their lives there, and the rest were more or less injured as well. There were a few people who couldn't be rescued from Level 4 prison, but it was already an incredible feat to be able to rescue so many people. The problem was that Nada was summoned by an old friend the moment he returned, and after he had a chat, he asked for Sillin, the newly appointed lieutenant commander of the 6th Division. Nada had been a squad leader for many years, and a mere lieutenant commander was nothing in his eyes, much less a lieutenant commander of another squad who had just been promoted. However, he couldn't resist his father's constant reminders, so Falvi reluctantly drove the plane his father had sent out to pick him up himself. Falvi's first impression of Sillin was, he didn't look like much. He looked a little dumb, and he was too young. He didn't have much of a sharp aura around him, and he was very gentle. You're Sillin. Falvi's voice was stiff and emotionless. This was also one of Falvi's great qualities as a squad leader. His face was expressionless, and even his voice was devoid of emotion. It was exactly because of this that his subordinates found him mysterious. Yes, I am. Sillin didn't care about Falvi's attitude at all. He would treat him however he wanted to. Falvi nodded expressionlessly. Let's go. Then came silence. A long silence. After Sillin boarded the plane, he saw that Falvi didn't want to speak, so he didn't ask any questions. He closed his eyes and rested for a moment. Just like that, the duo arrived at the A Squadron's base in silence. The plane landed at a place. This wasn't the place Sillin had come to last time, but according to the authority level, this place was a little higher. Chapter 183. Falvi led Sillin towards a semicircular building that wasn't too tall. He didn't say anything as he carried out his identity verification. Then, a scanning screen jumped out from the door and scanned both of them. After confirming their identities, they entered the building and took the vertical staircase all the way to the 5th floor. They arrived beside a door. Father, I've brought him here. Falvi said. The door beeped open after Falvi's voice. There was an old man sitting in the room. He wasn't that old, but he looked like he had been through a lot. Plus, his hair was white. Based on Falvi's hair color, Nada shouldn't have white hair, so it could only be acquired. Nada wasn't necessarily much older than Bart or Sombaleruo. But from the looks of it, 50 years in prison was a torturous period for Nada. Father. Falvi's expression was much gentler when he faced Nada. The estranged aura from before was gone. Nada smiled. Unlike Falvi, Nada's smile was very kind. For some reason, Nada was feeling a little sad right now. Maybe it was because he had just returned from Sector S. When Sillin and Falvi arrived, Nada was holding a book. It was a paper book, and it looked a little old. Sit, Sillin. Nada pointed at a chair beside him before turning to Falvi. You may leave first. I'll call you later. Falvi opened his mouth, but didn't say anything. He left in silence, but his eyes looked a little unwilling. After Falvi had left, Nada looked closely at Sillin like he was looking at a junior that he valued. I never thought that the 6th Division would produce someone like you. Nada sighed. Sillin was puzzled. Someone like me? What kind of person is that? Noticing Sillin's puzzlement, Nada smiled again and asked, You've read a couple of Komunidin's notebooks in Enji's possession, haven't you? Sillin nodded. Enji was brought out by Komunidin, and Komunidin was originally a member of Sanada's 3rd B Squadron. Nada sighed a little. When he heard the news of Enji's death, he didn't feel good. There weren't many people left in his original group, and Komunidin was glad that he had transferred Enji to the 6th Division before the incident. But who knew that they still wouldn't be able to meet again after they left Sector S? Nada stood up and said to Sillin, Come with me. This should be Nada's private place. After passing through several doors, Nada brought Sillin to a study room. Yes, a study room. There were many paper books in the study, and most of them were notes, diaries, and other related records. There were some books that Sillin knew were similar to the ones in his hands. They should all belong to Komunidin. Most of the books in Enji's hands are duplicates, and they are incomplete. All of Komunidin's parasitic research records are here. Oh right, there's also this. Nada took out a thick notebook from a closet. This notebook was different from normal paper. It was a semi-electronic notebook, and similar to some published newspapers, the pictures on it could be moved. Seeing Nada's cherished expression when he took out this thick notebook, Sillin carefully accepted it, and looked at Nada in puzzlement instead of flipping through the records inside. Nada explained, This is Komunidin's unfinished work. We call it the Parasitic Code. And there are a lot of parasitic species recorded in it. Almost all of them were encountered by Komunidin during his missions, but the records are incomplete. A lot of deeper research was cut off. One reason was that he didn't have much free time to research a particular parasitic species on its own, and the other reason was that conditions were limited. Many people, including the original members of the 3rd B Squadron, did not think highly of Komunidin's parasitic research. Everything stopped after the incident 50 years ago. Then what are you? Sillin, if you want to research these things, you can come and look at them whenever you need them. Although these things are classified as confidential by the regiment, and non-core researchers are usually not allowed to come into contact with them, most of the A Squadron's researchers are not involved in these projects. In order not to let Komunidin's research go to waste, I've decided to open this information to you. Although I'm very happy to come into contact with these things and see Senior Komunidin's research results, Senior Nada, can you explain more clearly? Sillin still didn't know what Nada meant. Was he asking him to take over Komunidin's research and continue his research? But he was the vice commander of the 6th Squadron right now. He might not have a lot of things to do normally, but he definitely didn't have much free time to specifically research these things. Nada shook his head. I just don't want Komunidin's research to go to waste. To be honest, there are very few people who have truly realized the value of the parasitic code, to this day myself included. Maybe it's because I don't understand it, but after that incident, the regiment commander classified the parasitic code as a confidential document. Other than some core researchers, no one else knows about the existence of this record, and most of those who knew about it died 50 years ago. Nada's voice grew a little gloomy when he said this. It was obvious that he was remembering a bad past. You think too highly of me. Sillin didn't feel too happy because of Nada's words. Why would a man like Nada who had just returned from Sector S believe in Sillin's abilities so much? It definitely wasn't because of Enji. Sillin knew from Enji's diary that Enji didn't hold much weight in Nada's eyes. If it wasn't for Komunidin, then Enji wouldn't even enter Nada's eyes. Nada stroked a notebook and said slowly, "Although I'm no longer the commander of the 3rd B Squadron, and have directly joined the A Squadron after my return, and logically speaking, I shouldn't care about these things anymore. Kamanadine is a good friend of mine. Before he passed away all those years ago, he passed all of his research results to me, so I also have the right to choose this information. This is also a responsibility I have borne. I believe in his words. The things he valued so highly must be of extraordinary value. Even when I was in prison, I often thought about how to display the value of these things. After I came back, I learned about Vanguard's current situation. And I also learned about you, Silen. Both Bart and Songba Leruo communicated with me, and they knew that I pay more attention to the parasites. That's why they recommended you, Silen. However, it was only after I investigated that I realized that you're far more outstanding than I imagined." While saying this, Nada brought up a document. The information flashing on the light screen was very familiar to Silen. It was information about the 2 parasites used to eliminate Poison Fong back then, and it was a very detailed analysis. The A Squadron's Core Research Institute must have done in-depth research on the 2 parasites at the time, or they wouldn't have come up with such a detailed conclusion. According to the explanation provided by the A-Team's Research Institute, both types of worms contain serial lethal genes that have been specially implanted in their bodies. As long as one of the serial lethal genes is activated, the worm will die, and the activation point is determined by time. Yes, although the planet was filled with the parasites released by Silen and Huimao, the 2 parasites had a point of decline in their life cycle, and that point of decline was the moment when the lethal gene was activated. They would gradually die, and their colony would gradually decline towards extinction. Silen did not wish for the entire planet to become a nest of parasites, or Vanguard would have a hard time taking down the entire planet. Not everyone had a physique like Silen, and Huimao's rare species in the universe was even rarer. When he said this, Nada could not help but grin. "You might not know this, but the previous commander of your 3rd B Squadron, Seru, was so happy that his face was about to blossom when he mentioned you." This time, Silen was truly surprised. This was the first time he heard Seru's former commander's opinion of him. He did not think that his former commander would still pay attention to them. "Oh, you might not know about Seru's situation. That guy just doesn't like to show off. I heard that the Amaus who was sent to Poison Fong to negotiate with the military was sent by Seru to negotiate with the military. That kid almost died of happiness." Actually, these people who were already mentioned as a squadron would often pay attention to the news of their former squadrons. When they gathered together, they would compare themselves with each other. It was just like how parents talked about their children. Who wouldn't want their child to have a Hall of Fame achievement? They couldn't wait to show off anything they had. However, Seru had been depressed for many years. During the days when the 6th Division was at a low ebb, every time Seru talked about it with Bart and the others, he would feel like killing his way to the 6th Division and beating up those disappointing brats. However, ever since the 6th Division came out of Sector Z, Seru gradually became more and more smug. Silen aside, even Bart and Songba Leruo had praised Silen a lot. Talent and ability weren't things that you could get just because you wanted to. Do whatever you want to do. Seru also said that you're the only person with a bit of drive in the 6th Division right now. Back then, Seru led the 6th Division to the point where they didn't have much autonomy and relied on him as their commander. But when Seru mentioned a squadron, the rest of them shriveled up. Nada said earnestly. Nada told Silen to come here and look at the data if he needed it. Everything inside the room had been moved from Kamunadin's place, and most people didn't have the right to look at the originals. In fact, they might not even have the right to see the duplicates. Naturally, Silen knew about this. He couldn't miss out on the opportunity to see Kamunadin's research results and related records. Silen stayed in the study and flipped through the notes. He knew that there would definitely be surveillance cameras in the room, but he didn't want to bother with them. Right now, the most important thing was to memorize these things as soon as possible. With Silen's memory, there was no need for duplicates. It was enough to flip through the originals once. There was no need for him to come here often in the future. After all, he didn't know when he would have the time to return to the stronghold after going on a mission with the team. Sillin realized that most of the time, Komunidin liked to record the information with his own hands. He especially liked to use the most common paper notebooks that had been abandoned in some places. The notebook that Sillin was holding was one of them. Flipping it open, he could see many records that were written down by Komunidin. Even the parasites were drawn by him. He had drawn many different types of parasites, and they were all vivid and lifelike. Komunidin mentioned in one of the notebooks that he would only have a deeper understanding of these creatures when he drew them with his own hands. From there, he would be able to understand their possible weaknesses and related ecological characteristics. Although Sillin knew that there were surveillance cameras in the room, he would never have thought that the people in front of the cameras were watching. How much do you think he recorded? Someone asked. I don't know. Nada shook his head. This kid is amazing. The person could not help but laugh. He's a good seedling, a rare seedling. It's rare to get such an evaluation from you, boss. The person that Nada called boss was the #1 leader of Vanguard, one of the 6 stars of Hunter, Ji Feng. Sillin flipped through the pages very quickly, even the book that was known as the essence of Komunidin's research, the Parasite Code. It looked like he was flipping through it casually, but in fact, Sillin had already memorized everything clearly. Sillin stayed there for 3 days. Halfway through, Nada sent someone to deliver food to him. The rest of the time, Sillin was flipping through the records in the study. Nada did not try to persuade Sillin, and just let him be. 3 days later, Sillin finally stood up from his chair, stretched his slightly stiff limbs and warmed up his muscles. 3 days of flipping through the records without rest and sleep had caused him to be highly focused and exhausted. At this moment, he could clearly feel the waves of exhaustion rolling over him. Rubbing his eyes, Sillin walked out of the study, bid farewell to Nada and left. As usual, Falvi used Nada's plane to send Sillin back. However, the way Falvi looked at Sillin had changed. He did not know what Nada had told him. Falvi had even spoken a few words of his own accord, surprising Sillin greatly. The first thing he did after returning to the 6th Squad stronghold was to have a good sleep. He did not pay attention to Lycrabe's research and development progress. After a cursory glance, he confirmed that there were no problems for the time being, and that Lycrabe would be able to overcome them with a little more time. Sillin also ignored Yudi's research on the prison's defense system data he had stolen from Sector S. Before Sillin left, the note Yudi had slipped into Sillin's hands was for Sillin to steal the prison's defense system program and related data for research. Right now, Sillin's mind was filled with dense parasites, molecular formulas and genetic strands that were flying around. He needed to digest them properly. Before Sillin prepared to go into closed-door cultivation, Diaz told him that he would be holding his wedding with Asha at the stronghold 10 days later. He told him that he must wake up on that day no matter what, or else he would be pulled awake by force. In reality, it did not take 10 days. Sillin slept for 8 days. During these 8 days, a lot of small things had happened. For example, Tico had officially joined the ranks, the 6th Division's Animal Legion had pried open Carrie's storage cabinet, and Tico's residence was publicly acknowledged as the scariest place in the 6th Division. Regardless, Shoten was very satisfied with the current 6th Division. The division had always been filled with excellent talents, and when he was still in the A Squadron, the former Captain Theroux had taken care of him quite a bit. This flattered Shoten greatly, and it was worth mentioning that Theroux wanted nothing more than to drag Shoten over and give him a good beating every time he saw him. Diaz had a radiant smile on his face as of late. To quote Carrie's own words, people with families were just different. When they heard that Diaz was getting married, old and new friends who could not attend the wedding specifically sent him their congratulations. The wedding was to be held in the 6th Division's auditorium. Sillin gave them a big red packet. This was what Diaz had requested. He wanted something more practical and practical. Therefore, Sillin directly sent a 6-digit memory card over. Diaz was so happy that his eyebrows almost floated up. On the day of the wedding, Diaz was dressed very formally. He was in high spirits when it came to happy events. He walked into the auditorium with a smile on his face and held the hand of the bride, Asha. In front of them, the 2 little guys, Qifeng and Tang Qiuqiu. Each carried a flower basket and scattered flowers along the way. Qifeng tried hard not to wag his tail, but when he was happy, it was difficult to control himself. His canines were smiling. This was the first time he had encountered something like this. It was the first time he had been together with so many people. He was very happy to experience such an atmosphere. During one of the performances, many people had to go up to offer their congratulations or perform. The most dazzling performance was Huimao and Lycrabe's duel, mechanical dance. When he heard the news that Lycrabe and Huimao were going to have a mechanical dance, Carrie looked at Lycrabe with a pitiful expression. Other people might not know Huimao's background, but he did, especially that mechanical form. Mechanical dance with such a strange creature? Wasn't that just asking for trouble? Originally, Silin, Yudos, and Tang Qiuqiu were the only people who had seen these two monsters dance at Acerella's dance night, in Sector F. Most people had never seen the atmosphere caused by these two guys dance. Therefore, when Lycrabe and Huimao took their first step to the beat, everyone's attitude changed. Once again, Lycrabe displayed the aura of the Wolf King of Dance Night on stage. Although it was not as good as Huimao, who already had the upper hand in the first place, the duo's violent dance still caused the entire audience to reach a climax. Even the other team leaders who were only here to go through the motions couldn't help but exclaim in admiration. This time, the 6th Division had produced quite a few monsters. Even Nada and the others' eyes were in deep thought. There was no need to prove it by force. The great hall that was dyed by the unique aura was already silent. According to Dias, this wedding wasn't just a blessing for him and Asha. It was also a blessing for Lycrabe and Huimao's dance to become famous throughout Vanguard. It took a long time for the audience to realize that they were humans and not robots after watching the duo's violent dance. Although the current technology allowed robots to move no differently, or even more smoothly than humans, the illusion of executing a programmed order lingered in everyone's mind for a long time. A feast was inevitable at a wedding, and there was no lack of gluttons in 6th Division. Especially a certain white fatty who was running around with his feet wide open. Tico's little white was still nibbling on its carrot quietly, but its eyes would occasionally glance at Huimao, Xiueqiu and the others. Not long after the wedding, the A Squad sent out news that the riots at Sector S had officially subsided. The subsiding of the riots at Sector S did not mean the beginning of peace. Perhaps a bigger wave was slowly approaching. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.